Greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome to tonight's second half, and happy Mother's Day. Before we jump into it, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. And yes, folks, they really do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to the second half, shall we?
Coonbo, how are you?
Doing very well, thank you.
Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate that. Now, like I said, I don't really have a format. Everybody knows that. So I guess pretty much I'll start off with a question and then we'll just go into it, and however it goes, it goes. What got you interested and into the field of cryptid research, Bigfoot, Dogman research?
Well, people that have heard me talk before, they've heard. I'm sure they've heard me say this, that I was raised on a farm in northwest Alabama, and this was a farm that had and still has Bigfoot that live on it, and I became aware of these things when I was just a very, very young kid, and around the time I was just old enough to start having clear memories of things that I still retain to this day. I was 2 years old, and I can remember some incidents that happened, and it was pretty scary and all, and I can remember hearing them screaming, sometimes even during the day, but usually late afternoon and then into the night. And the house that I was raised in up until the 5th grade, it was out in the country on our farm, and for the first several years of my life, we didn't have air conditioning, so at night in the summertime we slept with the windows open, and I had an attic fan that ran and pulled air in, the cool night air. Hopefully it was cool in the windows and across our beds, and of course you'd hear everything that went on out there, and I can remember just from the little bitty thing hearing the vocalizations and such, and one thing that really still sticks with me very strongly was when I was about 3 years old. We were playing around outside and over near my grandmother's house. My grandmother lived across a 20-acre field, or half of a square 40 from straight north of us, and so that's about 220 yards walk. And I was allowed, even as a little bitty kid, to walk over there, or to go over there, and or either my mom or somebody would take me over there. But anyway, we were outside playing, and it was getting dusky dark, and heard something started screaming, down in the lane north of our cattle corral and our horse stables. And immediately, my grandmother and the two ladies, there were three families besides. There were five families that lived on our farm when I was growing up, and there were one of the families ran our sawmill. Another family, the patriarch of the family, he was my dad's sort of ramrod, sort of the manager of the farm or whatever. And then the other family was they worked there on the farm. And anyway, but the mothers and my grandmother came out and started, rounding us kids up and getting us in the house when this thing started yelling. And I remember asking, what is that? What is that? And of course I'd heard the noise before, but never that close. And they said, "That's just that old catamount." That's what my dad and my grandfather called it, was catamount. And now in some parts of the country, a catamount's a cougar, but no, the word Bigfoot hadn't been invented. This was about 1957, and the word Bigfoot hadn't been invented for another 10 years probably. And so they had a lot of other names for them. Some of the people called them no heads. Some people called them, they called them boogers, hanks, goat men, wild men, hairy men, just all kind of names. But in fact, if you can, one of the roads that comes onto the northeast corner of our farm is called No Head Hollow Road. And that was one of their main travel routes, up and down this hollow. And if you wonder why they call them no heads, get online and look up the cover of, or the poster or whatever from The Legend of Boggy Creek. There's a picture of one going away from you, and you don't see its head. Or go to the GCBRO website and look at their main logo, and you'll see why they call them no heads. But an interesting thing, if you follow No Head Hollow out, and it runs basically from down around the Tennessee River at the northwest end of it, and follow it to the cross country up away from the river, you'll be going to the southeast. And when the hollow runs out, just keep going straight in that direction. You'll go over a low ridge, and you'll come down into what's called Booger Bottom. But anyway, back to the story. We hear this thing yelling and everything, and my mom came over. My grandmother made me go in their house. Well, my mom came over, picked me up, and took me home, and we're eating, and the thing's getting louder and stuff. We go to bed that night, and I'm laying up there on in the bed, and I can hear this thing screaming, and you can tell it's slowly getting closer. And there's a gate that's right there, sort of in between the old tractor shed and this storage shed, which is, you go through that, and you go through that gate, and you come out, and you can go to the right, and you go right to my grandparents' house, about 40, 50 yards away. Go to the left, you go to to my dad, the farm manager's house, and about 35 yards away, go to the southeast, and about 75, 80 yards, and you go to the folks' house that run the sawmill. And that old gate was an old cheap stamped steel and stamped out galvanized steel, and anybody that's been around those things know that they're really noisy. You can't touch the thing without it making a bunch of racket. Well, we heard it hit that gate, and you could hear it clearly. And when it did, the folks that ran our sawmill, they had 7 big old rough coonhounds, hunting dogs, and and they were plot hounds and a couple of Catahoulas and black and tans, and these were rough old, they were gamey dogs. They weren't scared of anything, and they all came roaring off the porch and out from under the porch and everything, go tearing off over there, and you could hear them. And they lit in after this thing, and oh my God, it was an unbelievable racket. And right at first, it sounded like the dogs were going to just eat this thing alive. And then all of a sudden, you started hearing the dogs screaming and arr, 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 and you could tell the dogs were being torn up and all. And then it just got quieter, and it started getting quieter. We could tell that some of the dogs were getting killed. And about that time, I started hearing rifle shots, and my grandfather came running out of the house with his 30-30 and started shooting in the air, shooting out through the treetops. He did this thing. He knew better than to try to shoot one, but he was shooting to scare it off. Well, at that instant, my dad came flying out of the house with a Brown automatic 5 shotgun loaded up with buckshot and a big flashlight, jumped in the truck and hauled ass over there. And by the time Daddy got over there, things had gotten quiet, and we could still hear a couple of dogs crying. And I clearly heard that he had to shoot one to put it out of its misery. And but we went over there the next morning, and there was just an unbelievable slaughter. There were dog parts everywhere. I mean, heads, legs, body torsos, bodies twisted in half, the backbones broken, dogs with their heads twisted around backwards, necks broken, slung all over a fairly large area, area that probably 100 yards across and 50 yards in every direction. And it was unbelievable. The thing had killed outright 5 of the 7 dogs, and my dad had to put one out of its misery, and the one that was left was injured, but it lived. And also during the night, the folks that ran our sawmill packed up and left, never to return. They threw everything they could into their car and their truck and got the hell out of Dodge. And my dad couldn't get them to come back for love nor money. I mean, they still would come in and run the sawmill, but they would no longer live on the farm. And come dark, they were gone. I mean, they were out of there. In fact, when it would start getting dusky dark, they'd haul butt. But I can remember, asking, what was that, Daddy? What did that? And it's just that, is that one of those old catamounts, and I asked him, what was a catamount? I asked my grandfather first, what is a catamount? He said, well, I don't really know, but it's sort of like a cross between a big bear and a great big huge gorilla. And when you think about it, for 1957, 1958 time frame, that's pretty good description.
Yeah.
And, the Yeti's never been heard of at that time. At this point, abominable snowman hadn't been heard of in our part of the country, and we'd never heard of Sasquatch or anything like that. That word never even been mentioned there. And and I asked my dad, I couldn't really understand, what my grandfather was trying to tell me. So I asked my daddy, Daddy, what's a catamount? And he said, well, it's sort of like maybe like a big gorilla, and maybe with some bear mixed in it, with maybe some kind of cougar or something mixed in it, because it can, they can go right up a tree, and that didn't really tell me much, but it was in line with what my grandfather had said, and then my we'd still hear them and all, and I was still curious about them. And what was weird is 2 or 3 months before my grandfather died, he got me in his old truck, and he never called me by my name. He just called me boy. He said, "Get the truck, boy. We're going to go back here on the back of the farm." And he goes driving me over out east of their house. And to this day, there's a big ridge back there, and it's not a real steep ridge or anything, because we farm it. We've had pasture on it for years. In fact, right now this year it was planted in corn, and but we've grown soybeans, cotton, corn, millet. We've had it in high grade pasture, and all that is part of the tillable acreage of our farm. But right up on top of this ridge, there's this one big single solitary oak tree. And if anybody knows much about trees that grow out in the open like that, with no other trees around them to shade them, they grow with big limbs all the way to the ground. And that's the way this big oak was. And it had big limbs all the way to the ground. So we go riding back there, and he pulls up in front of this tree. "You see that tree, boy?" "Yes, sir." He says, "Those catamounts sit up in that tree and watch us. And every time I come back over here, they jump down, they run off down in that holler." And he points off down into a hollow there, sort of to the northwest of where we were sitting, that goes down towards the river. And this is the Tennessee River. And he says, and I'm like, okay, 3 years old, so what am I going to say, And then he says, "Boy, I don't want to hear about you coming over here and climbing around on this tree." He said, "You don't need to be back over here messing around here by yourself." And he said, "And if I ever hear you bringing your little sister over here, I'll tear your rear end up." And I remember, even at that age, I'm thinking, that's a crazy thing to say. And my little sister was an infant. I mean, she was only like 6 months old or so at this time, if that old. I mean, she's just a little infant. And I'm thinking, at 3 years old, I had never even thought about climbing a tree. That was one thing. And certainly I had not ever thought about taking my little sister anywhere, with her. She wasn't even crawling at that time. And it was weird. I think he knew he was dying, because a couple of months later he was dead. He was gone. And I think he was just trying to instill something in me before he died. And then, so he passed away, and about a year or so later, I'm laying in the bed one night, and it was pretty close to this time of year, maybe a little bit earlier, but it was still hot enough at night that we would have the windows open, or still hot enough that at night we would have the windows open and have the attic fan going. By that time, I had graduated up, and I had bunk beds in my room, which was great, because we had those old crank-out casement windows in our house, and they were up off the floor a pretty good ways. And so those bunk beds put me up there really in line with those windows, so the cool air would come right across the bed. And of course, we had, if anybody knows about those old casement windows, the screens are on the inside, and and it had a couple little clips that you could unclip and then raise the screen up and look out, stick your head out the window if you want to, or you could pull the screen plumb out. But I'm laying there in the bed, and I hear gravel crunching outside. And my dad had put we didn't have gutters on our house, and when it rains hard in Alabama, and we just got that old just red clay dirt, and the rain coming off the house when you got no gutters, it cuts down through the grass, and it gets into that red dirt, and it splatters that old red mud all over the side of the house. Well, Mom and Dad didn't like that, so Dad had spread about of a gravel from the foundation of the house out from the house probably 4 feet or so, and so there was this border of gravel all the way around the house, and it's still there today. And I heard somebody out there walking on that gravel coming around the side of the house up under the eaves, and I could hear gravel crunching. Well, I thought it was my friend that lived over there, the caretaker of the farm. I thought it was his son. And of course, that was ridiculous. He wouldn't be out there by himself at that hour of the night. But I expected to see my friend Danny standing there, and I didn't. And so I looked to my right, and there's nobody. I looked to my left, and there's one of these damn boogers standing there. But he had his back up to the wall, and I'm saying I'm guessing it was a he. And I didn't see anything indicating that it was female. But it had his back up to the wall, and I clearly remember it had the palm of its right hand against the side of the house. And it had its head turned looking at me. And I looked at it, and my eyes got big. Oh, my bedroom was on the south side of the house, and the moon was up good. And the moonlight was it was actually a quarter moon, so the moon was over past it was over in the southwest, and the moon was shining, and it was reflecting in its eyes. Its eyes were reflecting yellow, not red, but yellow. And this thing had reddish hair, and just real pretty auburn-colored hair. And I realize now, but the ones out on our farm are really clean, and they look like they've just, every one of them I've seen, it looks like they've just come from the beauty shop or just had a shampoo or something. But that moonlight glinting in that hair, and mind you, this is the first one I've ever seen, and it looked like there was blood in his hair. And the descriptions that my dad, and my grandfather give me of a bear and a gorilla, those are both black. And so to see this red thing standing there in the moonlight glinting off of its hair, I just instantly thought it was blood. And I come flying off the bunk bed, go running into my parents' room. Mama, Daddy, there's a yellow eyed monster outside my window. And my dad never hesitated. He came flying out of the bed in his boxer shorts, and he had his slippers. He kept his slippers sitting there beside the bed, and he jumped in those slippers just like he was a fireman or something. He grabs that Browning shotgun out from behind the door, and grabs his head, this big old, about a 4 or 6 D-cell ever-ready, big old chrome ever-ready flashlight that I always sit on the bedside table. He grabbed that flashlight in one hand and a shotgun in the other, and he goes hauling ass out the damn door with in his boxer shorts and slippers. And he told my mama, he said, "Get the kids and get in the bathroom." Well, Mama got me, told me to go get in the bathroom, and she went and got my little sister out of the crib, and we go in the bathroom. She locks the door, and the bathroom was a safe place because there wasn't a window in there, and so we go in there, and we get all the way up against the back wall of the thing. Oh, and Mama's got her pistol, got her .38 in her hand, and we sit down on the floor. She sat us down on the floor, and then she sat down in front of us, and she had that pistol propped up across her knees, pointed at the bathroom door. And my dad stays gone about, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes or so, some amount of time, and we hear the door close. And I don't know if it was the front door or the back door, and I don't remember. And he hollered to my mom. He goes, "Hey, it's me! Don't shoot!" She said, "Okay." And he comes up there and he says, he says there, he said, "Okay, unlock the door." He said, "I'm out here in the hallway. Don't shoot me." And "I'm not." She unlocked the door, and the first thing she said, "Did you see it?" And he says, "No, but I heard it beating feet up towards the shack." And both my grandfathers built houses then, and they had this old wooden shack that they would set onto a lowboy trailer and take it out on a construction site and pull it off and set it up out there, and it would be their office while they were working on the house or something. And they kept that shack sitting up there in the northeast corner of that 40-acre field that we lived in the middle of. And what's interesting is that is still a travel route to this day. But that was the first time I saw one, and I was 4 years old. But so my grandmother and my great-grandmother and stuff, they talked about them like they were just as normal as squirrels and rabbits. And so I grew up hearing about them my whole life. And so I got really interested in them back in the 70s, and my friend, I was starting to live out there on the farm. We had moved into town by then, and my grandparents had all passed away, and the old farmhouse was still sitting out there. Well, I had fixed that thing up when I was in college, and whenever I was home, I'd live out there. Well, my buddy Jim Hart, otherwise known as Bubba Gump, online in the Bigfoot community, but Jim and I would, he was really interested in them too, and so we started hanging around out there at night and going around looking for them. And we knew they were out there. We'd hear them occasionally and stuff, and we'd hear about them. Other neighbors and stuff seeing them. And but we actually started researching and trying to look for them, trying to find them and stuff like that back in the mid '70s. So and interesting thing, I started hearing so many stories and stuff around in the area that I decided I needed to start writing this stuff down. And the very, very first sighting report that I ever wrote down was in 1978, and it was from a family that I went to school with their kids, and the oldest son.
There's some sort of noise going on there. There you go.
Oh man! Oh, let me turn this off. Sorry. It's a water heater coming on.
Oh,
sorry.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, you'll have to edit that out. But anyway, this family that lived about 3 or 4 miles east of me, and this is after I'm out of college, and I'm working at the local utility company in the electrical engineering department. And we're at lunch, taking a lunch break one day, and the oldest son of this family that lived out there, he starts telling me this story, and he'd asked me, where y'all working this afternoon? Well, we were surveying in and engineering a new power line out in that area. They were building some roads out there going out to the waterfront, and so we were laying all the power lines and surveying them in the right of ways, and then doing the engineering work on them. And I told him what we were doing, and we were having to drive right past past their house. And he said, well, watch out for that old goat man. And I said, what you mean? He said, oh, yeah, that thing scared us half to death here a couple of nights ago. And so he tells me the story. And he said they'd had supper. Their dad worked second shift at the big Reynolds Metals plant that was there in the Muscle Shoals area. Had a big, huge, I think at one time it was the largest aluminum plant in the world at one time. But anyway, his dad worked there on second shift. And so they'd eaten supper, and it was him and his mom and his younger brother, who was he was also in between my sister and my middle brother in school. So the older brother had already finished his homework, and he was in there watching TV. So the mother was washing the dishes, and the kitchen window faced east, and it's real pretty out there. It had a good view of it, and she was sitting there washing dishes and stuff, and the younger brother was doing his homework at the kitchen table. And so she noticed all of a sudden that that she wasn't seeing the moon anymore. She thought, well, gosh, are some clouds coming in? And so she leaned up to look out the kitchen window to see if she could see any clouds. And as she leaned up to the glass, this creature leaned in to the window from the outside. And it ended up their noses were probably only, half inch or so apart. And it absolutely scared her half to death. And she starts yelling, ah, ah. It scared her so bad she couldn't just scream. She was doing this little kind of noise. And she was stumbling backwards, and she had her hands up over her mouth. And the younger son looked around like, what the hell's going on, And he looks there, and he sees the thing looking in the window at him. And he said the thing was actually turning its head, looking around in the kitchen through the window. And he hollered and jumped up from the table so fast he turned the dinner table over. And, of course, that made a huge racket. Well, the older brother hears all this and comes running into there from the living room or the den, wherever the TV was that he was watching, and he sees the thing. Well, they'd had enough activity out there that their father had wired up big floodlights on every corner of the house, and he'd wired up switches, 4 or 5 switches around the house where you could flip any one of these switches and all of them would turn on. He'd installed some relays and stuff like that up in the attic. And he was, a good electrician. And so one of those switches was right there next to the kitchen door coming out of the hallway. And so he had enough presence of mind. He flipped that switch on. It just lit up everything out in the yard, all the way around the house like daylight. And the thing, when he flipped all those lights on, it lit it up good. It lit up the booger really well. And it jerked his head back, and it whirled around and hauled ass. And he went running down the hallway and flung open the front door and saw it ran across their front yard to the southeast, and then it started running down the street. It ran down the street, and then it ran off into some woods that were further down the street from their house. And down a hill, as you went off down a hill going towards the river, and it ran off. He saw it dart over into the woods. And anyway, so I wanted to get the report, so I asked if I could come out and write all this down and talk to him and his mom and his little brother. So So I did, and I made a point. I wanted to talk to each one of them individually, and they told the story just like pretty much just like what he had told me at work. And when I was asking what it looked like and everything, well, it didn't really jive with what I had seen. But I thought, well, it's, I guess they just saw it. It was such a short encounter that maybe they didn't see it real good. And so I just thought it was just regular Bigfoot. And interesting thing was, just a very short time later, this was getting close to this was dove season opened up, or it had just opened, and I had been invited on a dove hunt, and there was a big hunting club out there that had land south of where these folks lived, where they would have dove shoots, and I went to the dove shoot out there, and like I said, as a guest, and then we had a big feed up at their clubhouse, which was through the woods, cross country, was not even a half a mile from this family's house that had this encounter just a couple of weeks before. And somehow I got to talking to the cook, and he got to telling me about this thing that was this haint, as he called it, or booger, this thing that would come in and would rummage through their dumpster. Or actually, they didn't have dumpsters back then. What he had just a bunch of big old garbage barrels back there, and he would come rummage through those barrels and get would eat a lot of dove and quail, and they'd have fish fries. It was always, whenever they'd have some kind of a feed out there, it would always come in and rummage through the garbage barrels. And so I caught him when he was done with his cleaning up and everything, and I took a report from him, wrote it all down, and he described the thing the same way as the other family that I had interviewed described it. And again, it didn't jive with my description of a Bigfoot, and there were several distinct details that were really different than what I had seen. But I just sort of blew it off at the time. So, over the years, as I started, taking more reports and talking to more people and stuff, I started figuring out that there were more than one kind of Bigfoot. And that there wasn't just the kind that we had on our farm, and that there was another kind that was lighter weight and didn't get as tall. The one on our farm, the big male, he was about 10 feet tall, and I actually saw him for the first time in 1980, October of 1980, and I saw him up closer than I wanted to see him, and I got him marked really, really well against the side of our stable, and against a tree limb on a big old tree that we had a big limb on it that we used to pull engines with and stuff like that. And I knew exactly how far it was from the ground up to the bottom of that limb. And also, I caught him against the eave as he walked around the corner of our stable building, and we had a drip rail in the siding right there, even with the bottom of the gable, and that thing was exactly 10 feet off the ground there on the south side of the stable. And I saw him up against that, and as he was walking along, his head was bobbing up and down right along that, even with that drip edge. So I knew he was 10 feet tall. And plus I measured just to be sure against that tree that he passed under, his big tree limb. And he was rather upset when during this episode, because I had moved earlier. I had moved the sweet feed troughs and the lick wheels, which a lick wheel is a big metal tank, holds about, I don't know, maybe 40, 50 gallons of ours would hold about 40, 50 gallons, probably about 50, 55 gallons of a molasses or syrup compound that had a bunch of minerals and stuff mixed in it, and which were good for the cattle. And there was a wheel that turned. There was a slot in the top of it, and a wheel mounted there. That the bottom of the wheel reached down to the bottom of the tank, and the cattle would lick it, and it would turn and lift up more of the molasses and stuff. But we had a couple of those, and we had several sweet feed troughs, and I had moved those from the west side of the farm over to the east side of the farm because we moved our cattle. This thing was PO'd because its little extra food supply and sweet supply had been moved, and it was raising hell. And that was in October of 1980. But as more people over wider and wider areas, I knew about the kinds that were like in the Patterson-Gimlin film, what we call the patty type. That the males are about 10 feet tall and the females around 8 feet, plus or minus, and very hugely built. But I also had learned about and found the tracks of these lighter weight ones. They were still horrendously strong and huge big barrel chests, but they weren't as wide across the shoulders, and they were only like maybe 8.5 feet tall. The males, and the females would only be, maybe 6.5, 7.5 feet tall, something like that, max. And so I had gotten to the point that I was asking when I would talk to people, what did it look like? Was it like this kind or like this kind? And then I was still hearing about these other things that people would describe that had they looked like that their legs looked like dogs' legs or goats' legs, like if you stood them up on their back legs, or like goats when they stand up on their back legs, going to butt heads with another goat, another billy goat. That their legs looked like goat legs or like dog legs. And I'm just thinking, what is this? And I kept hearing it often enough that I began to believe that this wasn't just misidentified stuff. It was that there was something else out there that wasn't Bigfoot. And they would talk about that. Nobody talking about Bigfoot. I hardly ever had anybody mention the ears. But with these other things, people would often mention that they had pointed ears, and I would ask them about the ears. I would ask them, well, are the ears like you're talking about like a Labrador Retriever or something? No. More like a Doberman Pinscher's ears, but a little bit more hairy, something almost like a wolf's ears or something. And and I'm thinking, and some people say it had a snout. It had a snout on it, just like a wolf or something. And some people would say that they were werewolves, and I'm like, yeah, that's a bunch of hooey. And then, in the meantime, I had gone to work for the government in 1980, and had moved up to after the incident that happened in October. It scared my wife so badly. We'd only been married about 6 months, or a little less than 6 months, and she would not stay on that farm another night. And so by the next weekend, we had moved lock, stock, and barrel to Huntsville, Alabama, from over out east of Muscle Shoals. So let's fast forward to 1984. We were getting ready for the first Department of Defense mission of the space shuttle. I was one of the electrical engineers that worked on the space shuttle for NASA, and we were getting ready for just a absolutely horrendous amount of data to be downloaded during the flight, from the shuttle to the ground. So they built a huge new ground station there at Redstone. We were having built and then installing all kind of recording equipment and just tremendous amount of stuff. There was a lot of the equipment being built by a contractor down in South Alabama, down between outside of Union Springs, Alabama. And there weren't any motels in Union Springs, so we were all staying out at Troy, Alabama. And a lot of the workforce that worked out there at this facility commuted back and forth. They're from Troy. And so I started to work one morning about, we started at 7 a.m. and I always had a kickoff meeting with the folks. And there were these two ladies that rode to work together. And I noticed when they came in, they were upset and they were crying. And I'm thinking, gosh, what's going on with them? And we had our meeting and everything, and they just, you could tell they weren't focused on the meeting. They were just something bad had happened. And so, and by the way, nobody knew about my Bigfoot research or my interest in Bigfoot or anything like that. No, none of them knew. And so and this is an ultra high priority project, and it was top secret and everything. And these are very, very skilled workers and very highly trained ladies, and I needed them to be focused and at 100%, for working on this equipment, because it's very, very technical equipment that we were working on. So once we got done with our kickoff meeting, everybody started out to work. Now I asked those ladies to say, hey, come on over here, come in my office. Went in the office. I said, what's going on? What's the matter? Well, they didn't want to talk about it. And so I just shut the office door, and I said, ladies, I said, let's talk about it. I said, what's got you guys so upset? I mean, do you need to go home, or, I need you focused, on the job. Anything that's affecting your work, I need to know about it. Are you sick? No, we're not sick. What's going on? Well, you wouldn't believe us if we told you. I said, you'd be surprised what I'd believe. And, well, we saw something today on the way to work. and I'm like, oh, really? And the interesting thing, I had already, in my short time there staying at Troy, I had already heard several Bigfoot reports in that area. I had even heard some where they were coming into town raiding dumpsters around some restaurants and fast food joints. And there was a country club being built out on the southwest side of town, and the people out there working construction at the country club on the golf course had several sightings along a creek that flowed through there. So I knew there were boogers. I said, I just flat asked them. I said, did y'all see a Bigfoot? No, we wish we had. I said, really? And I said, well, I've been researching Bigfoot for years. And I said, I've heard all kind of stories, so you can tell me. Well, they sort of looked at me, and so I had one of my ledgers, one of my log books out in my car. I said, just wait right here. So I just went out to my car and got it, brought it in, showed it to them, and I showed them, and I said, look, I said, here's where I take my reports. I said, I talk to people all the time. And I showed them a couple of people I thought they would know. They're in Troy, and they recognized one of them. And I said, so you can tell me what you saw and what happened. And they says, well, it wasn't a Bigfoot. I'm thinking, oh boy, here we go. And so, and I said, well, what was it? They said, one of the ladies just broke down and started sobbing. I mean, just her whole body shaking. She's crying. The other lady said, it was a huge werewolf. And I said, oh, really? So they described it to me, and I talked to one of the ladies, and I talked to the other lady, and they just described this thing. And the thing that got me, that both of them said, was how the evil that they felt from the thing. They were going around the road. They were going up U.S. Highway 29, going from Troy to Union Springs. They were a few miles out of town, and at that point, the highway sort of parallels a creek bottom. The creek is off on the right-hand side of the road, and there is a pretty good-sized hill on the left-hand side of the road. And they had come around a long left-hand curve that went around sort of the southeast side of this hill, and had come to a very short little straightaway, and the road started curving around to the right and towards the east. And there's a curve sign there in the highway. And they said as they were approaching this curve sign, and this was at about 6:15 in the morning, as they were approaching this curve sign, this thing came walking up the side of up the bank out of the creek bottom, up onto the shoulder of the road right beside this curve sign. And it stopped, and it turned, and it looked at them, and it made eye contact with them. And the lady sitting and the lady driving, she stomped on the brakes. That was her reaction. She stomped on the brakes, and she couldn't get stopped in time, and she's slowing down, and the way she was, if she'd have kept stopping at that rate, the thing would have been right there beside the car, and right there by the passenger door, or right by the passenger side fender. And the lady in the passenger side, she said that thing was looking her right in the eyes, and her exact words were, I could feel it trying to suck my soul out of my body. That was her exact words. I've never forgotten that. And the other lady said that thing was absolutely pure evil. She said it exuded pure evil. And she said the lady sitting on the passenger side started screaming, go, 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 and so the lady just floorboarded it and shot past the thing. And she said, as they went past it, it was just had its eyes just drilling into that lady on the passenger side. And she said that she could feel it trying to pull her soul out of her body. And
wow.
Now, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, that's terrifying. And like you said, these ladies, because I've heard this. You and I have spoken for a couple hours the other day, and like you said, these ladies were not your average. They were very educated women, and
very, very educated women, and very educated women. I mean, these ladies could work. Well, hell, they were subcontracting for NASA,
right?
And they had top secret military. They had top secret clearances, and these were very, very highly trained, very skilled, very intelligent ladies. And so I told him, I said, I have heard descriptions of the creature you're talking about. I said, I've heard it. I said, I've been hearing it for years off and on. I said, and that's when, and I asked them, and they had just terrifically detailed descriptions of its legs, its shoulders, how its posture was, its what its face looked like, and its head. They said it looked like it had just a gigantic wolf's head, but that the snout was a little thicker than a wolf's. That the nose wasn't quite as pointed as a wolf's, but but they could clearly see its fangs. They said they could see its upper and lower fangs, canine teeth, and they said it had like wolf's ears, or like maybe almost like German Shepherd ears or something. And they said its ears were laid back, like it was pissed or something at them. And they said it had huge shoulders, and the upper body, it said it had a narrow waist, but it said it had humongous upper body, but real barrel chested, not wide like a patty type Bigfoot, and but the upper body was just massive, just big barrel chested, and they said it had hands on it. They could see, they both saw its hands, and they said one of the ladies said that actually put one of his hands out, and they thought that it touched or got a hold of the curve sign, the post of the curve sign. And I asked them if they would show me that evening, if they would show me, where this happened. And they were really reluctant. I said, look, I've got a gun. I said, we can go back there, and if you'll just show me where this happened and where you saw it, show me the sign, and then you can go on. So they agreed, and so we took off just as quickly as we could and hauled butt down there before it got dark. And we got there, and I got them to. At this time I had gotten the habit of, I had a stick of bamboo with a paper plate stapled to it, and the stick of bamboo was about 5-6 feet long. And when I would be trying to get people to help me estimate how tall the things were, I'd get behind whatever cover, I'd get wherever the thing was, the Bigfoot or whatever that they were seeing, and I would hold that thing up. I'd get them to tell me to stop when the paper plate was up about where its head was. So I did that with them, and they both stopped me at the same place. And I figured this thing was about 9 feet tall, but it was not standing straight up. It was sort of crouched, but it was, its head was, the top of its head was about 9 feet. And they had it marked pretty good on the curve side. And so they wanted out of there because it was getting dusky. And so I told them, go ahead. And they took off out of there. So I got to looking on the side of the road. Oh, the lady that was driving noted that when she stomped on the gas and shot past the thing, she looked up the rearview mirror and she saw it run across the road and up the bank on the other side. And so I looked, and I found sort of a scratch or whatever, or some disturbed gravel right there. Or maybe it kicked off, taking off across the road. But when I got to the other side of the road, on the southbound shoulder of the road, I found very clearly where it had kicked off, and I found a pretty clear imprint of the pad of its feet and its toes with claw marks, about 6.5 feet up the bank of that embankment, and this wasn't a rock embankment. This was just a cut dirt embankment, and like you see down south, a lot of the cuts and stuff where they've cut into the side of the hills to make roads, they're not rock. It's just dirt, and but it was a very clear, one clear paw mark, about 6.5 feet up, and when I tried to pull a tape measure on it as best as I could, from where it kicked off of the shoulder of the road to where the foot was, linear distance from one to the other was about, I don't know, 15, 16 feet, something like that. The next one was just below the crest of the bank, which the crest of the bank was about 13 feet above the roadway. And the next one was just below the crest of the bank, and about a little over 12 feet up from the bottom of the bank. And then I found one over the crest of the bank, about another 10 feet or so. And then it was in the woods, and I couldn't find anything much definite after that. But anyway, I get back to seeing the tracks. That's the first time I had ever seen physical evidence. And by this time, I had seen enough Bigfoot tracks on my farm. The big alpha on our farm throws a 22-inch track. And I had seen them, and I had seen a lot of 15 to 17, 18-inch tracks, and very few of them that were above 20 inches. But I had never seen one of these tracks that looked like sort of like a gigantic dog. They were quite right for just a big dog track. They were wider across the ball of the foot, but all I saw was just the ball of the foot, and then the toes, and then claw marks. Now, people ask me, and I have seen other Dogman tracks. I've seen them with 5 toes, I've seen them with 4 toes, and I've seen them with 3 toes. But I have not seen enough of them to know what the norm is. But I've seen them with 3, 4, and 5 toes, and I have heard of them with 6 toes. I have not personally seen a 6-toed track, right. Dogman track. But now, at this point, so once I had seen that track, and they were good enough and clear enough for me, and I have seen Bigfoot tracks going up embankments. They're way different, and I knew then that I was dealing with something else. And then everything fell in place. That all these people that had been describing these other creatures as dogmen, werewolves, and goat men, and just some kind of weird things, had a snout on them and all. I realized that there was something else out there, and that's when I started coming up with this numbering plan. And originally I called the big patty type, which was the first ones that I ever saw. And it looked like the ones in the Patterson-Gimlin film. I call them the type 1s. And these other ones that people call them swamp apes and stuff like that, and they're somewhat smaller, I call them type 2s. And these werewolf-looking ones, I was calling them type 3s. And like I said, if you want to see a good, of course, the one in the Patterson-Gimlin film, that's a perfect female type 1. And there are pictures and artwork and stuff out there of type 1 males. And if you want to see a really good picture of a type 2, get online and search for the book Them and Us. Them and Us. And look at what the guy that wrote that book, look at his his rendition of what a Neanderthal really looked like. You know, the Neanderthal pictures that we've been shown in school, that we were taught in school, is not what this guy believes that they look like. But look at his rendition of a Neanderthal and lose the spear and lose the vertical slit pupils and give it a little bit more of a human type nose, and you've got pretty much a type 2 Bigfoot. Look at the barrel chest and all that.
Yeah, when you told me about that, I looked it up when you and I were talking that night, and it blew my mind, you know, because what we had been taught was the Neanderthal resembles not. I mean, I was like blown away. I don't know if you remember, but it was really an enlightening moment. Going, wow, you know, this actually fits, you know, a lot better into the whole thing. So sorry to cut you off on that. I just needed to.
No, you didn't cut me off at all. So I rocked along there, and I went back, started going back through all my journals and my reports and everything. And as I start marking them, type 1, type 2, type 3, type 1, type 2, type 3, you know, trying to classify them. Okay. And then in the late 90s, I started researching down in East Texas. And it didn't take me long to, and I got involved with some guys down in West, and I started seeing. I was used to seeing 3-toed tracks, but I started seeing. Oh, now one of the things that I learned is that I'll go back. Don't let me forget to talk about the feet.
Okay.
All right. I started seeing, it's common to see 3-toed Bigfoot tracks. And I believe that that's just I believe that there's probably 5 toes there in most cases, but that the toes are webbed together. And that is a defect that you see in humans. You know, sometimes, you know, and it's not a rare defect for hands and fingers and toes to be webbed together in humans, and it's not as common now as it used to be. But that's also an effect that can happen due to inbreeding, generations of inbreeding. And one of the things that I believe is that, and there's pretty good evidence for it, is that when the white man brought in their European diseases, smallpox, measles, chickenpox, and stuff like that, and the Native Americans did not have resistance to that, it just started wiping them out. And there was even some low-down scumbags that actually purposely infected Native American tribes with these European diseases to wipe them out. You know, they gave them blankets that infected people had used and such as that. But not only did that wipe out millions of Native Americans, but I believe it also wiped out millions of Sasquatch, Bigfoot. Yeah. And I believe that is what has caused some of the weirdities that we see in the normal Bigfoot population. It was a result of generations of inbreeding that was caused by the bulk of the population being wiped out back in the 1600s, 1700s, and early 1800s, and that there were just small little breeding populations left, and they ended up being inbred in many cases. So I think that's why we see what accounts for a lot of these 3-toed tracks. Well, down in Texas, I started seeing tracks, regular looking Bigfoot tracks, with claws on the toes, it looked like. You and I, humans, have what's called plantigrade feet. In other words, when we're standing up, standing there, our heels are on the ground. When we walk, our heels hit the ground. Bigfoot are the same way. They have plantigrade feet. When they're standing up, their heels are on the ground. When they walk, their heels are on the ground. Their heels hit the ground. Now, when they start moving quadrupedally and bend over, their heels come up. But you know when that's going on because you can find the knuckle prints that indicate that they're doing that. They also, because they have a mid-tarsal break in their feet, they can actually hide or disguise their tracks to look like very similar to, if the ground is soft enough, it looks like that cattle or horses have come through an area, because all you'll find is little round pug marks, because they can actually scrunch up their toes almost like we can our fist, and so that they don't leave toe prints, and they leave these pug marks. So you researchers that are actually out there in the field, if you're in an area where you know that Bigfoot have been traveling through and you cannot find any tracks, but you're like down in a ditch or along a creek bank or something, it looks like that somebody's been leading ponies or cattle through there, and you see these little round, I call them pug marks, or little round prints in the dirt, and they're indistinct. You know, you can't see a clear hoof print or something like that. That is often what Bigfoot will leave behind when they're traveling quadrupedally, and they have their fists doubled up and they have their toes scrunched up, because they can do things with their feet that we cannot. And I have found heavily used travel routes that I actually physically observed the Bigfoot moving through there quadrupedally, and go back down there thinking I'm going to get some really good tracks and everything, and that's what I found. I thought, well, what the hell? And I finally figured it out. That I figured that that's what they were doing. And that was now, I haven't seen that very many times, but I physically observed them down in Mississippi one time, coming out of a big tract of pine forest and dropping off down into a creek. And they followed this creek, meandered across a quarter section of land, and they followed that creek over into the tract of woods on the other side of this quarter section of land. A quarter section is 160 acres in a square, and it's a half a mile on the side. So they followed this creek that meandered across this 160 acre bean field, and they didn't leave a single track in it. All they left was these little, what I call pug marks.
Wow.
And it was a whole troop. We were able to count them because of their communication, their little noises that they made as they kept track of where they were. It was a whole family unit.
How many about would you say would be in that particular family?
In that particular family, there was about 8 that were making noise.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Really quick, I did talk to you, and I usually have 45 minutes of record time. Tonight, I was able to figure out how to do up to 2 hours. We're coming up about on 100 minutes. So we got about 20 minutes left. I know you did say that you'd be willing to come back on the show and share some more. Can I just ask a couple of questions?
Sure. Yeah.
Now, one thing that really interested me, and you kind of shocked me when you said yes, you've heard, is when I said, what would happen if a Sasquatch met up with a Dogman? And you said a Dogman would absolutely, tear a Sasquatch apart. Has there been any accounts that you know of that has happened?
Well, I have heard from some folks that live up there in the area around Land Between the Lakes. A guy started telling me this probably 10 years ago that the Dogman says is a commercial fisherman, and he's always out, in all weather, and sometimes all times of the day, different times of the day when the catfish are running. And I sort of blew him off. Some of the things he told me, I didn't, I took note of them and everything, and I wrote it down, but often I'll make little notes in there, improbable or doubt it, or this need to investigate this more. But I went up there to his house, and let me tell you what, he does not live there at LBL. His family was one of the families that were bought out and had to move out of Land Between the Lakes. He lives up on the Ohio River now, sort of north and a little east of LBL. And that's definitely a boogery place where he lives. I mean, a seriously boogery place. And he said some things that he wouldn't. Not everybody would know what some things he told me, and that made me realize that guy's shooting me straight. And then he told me about a day that he and his uncle or somebody were down fishing around the canal that separates the north end of Land Between the Lakes from the what's it called? Not Grand Island, Grand Rivers, the little town of Grand Rivers. And they were fishing along the Lake Barkley end of the canal, and he saw this Dogman over there on the north side of the canal, not on the LBL side, but on the Grand River side, along the bank. And it was doing something that definitely Dogmen do that Bigfoot do not do. And I have heard several accounts of, I have heard other accounts of what they do. Now, this is something that I'm not going to reveal it because it's something that I use to help judge whether somebody's telling me the truth or not. And this guy described it perfectly. So I knew he was telling the truth. So I keep in contact with him, and he's telling me, and I have heard it from other people as well that spend a lot of time in that area, that the Dogmen are moving into that area, and that the Bigfoot are moving out, and that the Dogmen will take over an area, and that the Bigfoot are scared of them. Now, that leads me to another story. I've done a lot of research up and down the Des Moines River up in Iowa. We've had a similar situation occur up there, where I have found that. Oh, back to the feet, real quick.
Yeah.
A normal type 1 or type 2 Bigfoot has plantigrade feet. Dogmen, the canid type Dogmen, have what is called digitigrade feet. In other words, when they're standing up, their heel is not on the ground, and it's called the hock, like on a dog. That's the dog. That is a dog's heel, and they walk on the balls of their feet. So, and when they're standing up and when they're walking, their heel does not touch the ground. They walk on their toes. That's how come they call it digitigrade. And it's equivalent of the ball of the pad that a dog had. Well, the pad mark that a dog leaves in his track right behind his toes, that is the ball of his foot.
Okay.
And so that's what you get from a Dogman is you get the pad, and it's not shaped just like a dog, like a dog print that you're thinking of, that you think you're going to. And it's easily distinguished from a bear. The claws are totally different, but they have digitigrade feet, whereas normal Type 1 and Type 2 Bigfoot have plantigrade feet. In other words, their heel hits the ground every step they take when they're walking upright. Now, I started finding down in Texas plantigrade feet with clawed toes. And I ran into some folks that lived in an area down there right along the Texas-Louisiana border that got to talking about the snouted ones or the baboon-headed ones. And I'm thinking, what in the crap is all this? And I started asking about the werewolves and all that. No, it's not a werewolf. This is different. This has a body like a Bigfoot. We got a Bigfoot body, but it's got claws on its toes and claws on its hands, and it's got a baboon-looking head and big old canines, big fangs. I'm like, crap. And then the damn picture came out of the Beast of Seven Shoots.
Mm-hmm.
You can look it up online. The Beast of Seven Shoots, and its Shoots is spelled Chutes. And Seven Shoots is a park in Quebec, Canada. A guy was taking a picture of the waterfalls there, and he was looking at the pictures later, and he noticed this thing standing there looking at him. And it is one of these snouted Bigfoots with the baboon-looking head. So now I had to change my numbering system. That is what I call a Type 3, and the canid dogmen, the werewolf type dogmen, I classify them as a Type 4 now. So one is Type 1 is a patty, Type 2 is a Neanderthal type, Type 3 is the Beast of Seven Shoots type, Type 4 is the canid werewolf Beast of Land Between the Lakes type.
Okay.
And yeah, so that's my numbering system. Now, folks have added to it. Some people say Type 5 is the little people. Well, I've never seen a little people, and I've never, other than my friend Doug, and and I don't research them. I don't look for them. I've only heard myself personally one report of them. And however, a few years ago there was an expedition up in either Minnesota or Michigan, and a lady got an absolutely fantastic picture of one. And so I've done everything I can to debunk that picture, and
Could it be a juvenile? Could it be a juvenile Sasquatch?
I don't know. This thing's got a little decoration, a little headband on his head made out of leaves or something. Yeah. Oh yeah. It's crazy. I'll see if I can get permission to share it.
So it's almost like
it's not my picture, but
it's almost like an evolved. So it's more evolved along the lines to where. Okay, and, that's neat.
Yeah, but I don't, like I said, I don't do that. So I was questioning it, and somebody gave me that picture, and I know the lady who it came from. So she's reliable. Right. So I'm not gonna. So I can't dispute it. So anyway, I have since found out that the ones that are moving in up there and displacing some Bigfoot along the Des Moines River are the Type 3s. And I have taken a number of reports of the Type 3s out in Oklahoma. and there's quite a few of them down in parts of East Texas and western Louisiana. So they are not near as common, as they're the least common of the 4 types. The type 4 canid type seem to be much more widespread, but the canids are in small little groups, and I've never heard of anything more than 4 or 5 in a family unit, whereas these type 3s seem to be in larger groups. It's common to hear of 18 to 25 in a group.
Wow.
It's
and they're aggressive, right? They're more aggressive than the type 4, or no?
Well, no, I don't know. People say that people that have had close encounters with them say that they are evil, but the type 4s are supposedly the most evil.
Right.
But they are evil, and they are. But they're not just indiscriminate, bloodthirsty killers. I personally know a lady who's had several encounters with them, but it got bad enough that she moved off and left her house. So she just abandoned her house, and she made story. Right. But I know we're probably right up against the end of our time.
Yeah, we've got about 9 minutes left. How about we end tonight? I'm looking forward to, like I said, to the audience. I had almost a 3-hour conversation with you, and I was blown away. And I feel honored just to be able to speak with you and have you on the show. Looking forward to having you come back. Is there anything that you could possibly share with the not inspiring, but inspiring crypto researcher that wants to go out and look around? Because you did share, hey, if you guys are in the bank, when you see these like divot-like things, that's the one. Is there anything that you could share?
Well, I just want to say I'm just an old country boy. I grew up outside of Ford City, Alabama. And that's still to this day a little unincorporated place. And I didn't even grow up right there. I grew up out several miles from there. And I worked my way through college and got lucky and got a pretty good job and learned a lot. And then eventually I never gave up on my dream of working with the space program, or eventually, and it took a lot of school. I had to go back to school several times, but once I got to that point, though, they pretty much paid me to go to school. But anyway, the big thing was I got out there and just spent time in the woods looking around, and I tried to observe I tried to look critically at the things I was seeing. I remember when I was just a little boy over on the back side of the farm, I used to find these little teepee formations and out there in the woods. And I would see other things. I'd go down a fire break road, go back there going fishing. I'd come back out and there'd be trees pushed down across the road. Just keep your eyes and your ears open. I've researched now in 39 or 40 states, and I've been doing this since the mid '70s, and I'm not a believer. I'm a knower. I am not trying to prove they exist. I'm convinced that the government will never let you prove that they exist. So what I'm interested in doing is learning more about them and then teaching others about them. That's my motivation. Is just learning more about them and then teaching people. And and the more I learn, the more questions I have.
Yeah.
like, you know, we discovered some of their little signs that they do. Oh, I'll tell you something. I'll give you a little tidbit. The X formations. Any of you that are out there in the woods very much, in Bigfoot country, you will sometimes come across these X formations, and they use our like fire breaks and power lines and country roads and stuff as travel routes often. And that's why you see a lot of signs and formations along roadways. Those signs and formations are not for us. They're not telling us to keep out. They're for other neighboring troops or family units of Bigfoot. And just because you don't see any of those doesn't mean there's not around. It just means that there's not troops competing over the same territory. Their territories are not bumping up against each other, because Bigfoot are not stupid. They're not going to waste energy. You know, the old saying country folks have, good fences make good neighbors. Well, if you ain't got no neighbors, no use wasting money and time putting up fences. So, you know, there are vast areas where there are Bigfoot in there, but the population density is very little, and you won't see territorial markers. But that doesn't mean they're not there. They're just not there as much as they are in other places. But when you start seeing a lot of territorial markers, a lot of X formations and bows and stuff like that, and that are interwoven, that you know that were not naturally made, that's when you know that you have a pretty good population of Bigfoot in an area.
Right.
And but the one thing that I do know that they do that is directed against us, and it's not just a keep out sign, it's a keep the hell out or I'm going to tear you to shreds, is if you find a tree trunk jammed in the ground with the roots up in the air, those are often directed against us.
Okay.
And people will say, oh, loggers do that to mark bogs and stuff. Yeah, they do. But when you see a line of them up on the side of a mountain in Alaska that stretched for 2 or 3 miles down a side of a mountain range, that's not loggers doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, or you see one of these, or you've been going in and out of the woods in this one area, investigating for several days, and you go home for lunch, and go for lunch, and you come back, and right in the shoulder of the road, there's a 6-inch diameter wild cherry tree jammed down into the shoulder of the road about 2 feet deep. And with the roots sticking up in the air, you know the logger didn't do that.
Right.
Right where you had been coming and going in and out of the woods. Yeah, that's one thing. That's the one formation that they'll do that I know is directed against us.
That's like their no trespassing, keep out.
Right.
All right.
Right. And they do mess with us. It's fairly common to go into an area and then you're coming back out, and there's been a tree pushed down across the road. There's been no big wind or storm or anything like that. That's fairly common. And but I tell you a good word of advice, and I tell everybody this, and it's a mandatory on anytime I go into the woods or take anybody in the woods with me, is when we go in and we're going to get out of our vehicle, you turn that vehicle around and you point it in the fastest and safest way out.
Yeah.
You make sure that that if you have to make a hasty exit from a place, that you can jump in that vehicle, crank it up, throw it in gear, and put her to the floor, and you're pointed out. You're not having to turn around or a bunch of crap like that.
That's some solid advice. I mean, just you don't have to be an Einstein to figure out why.
Right. And keep if you're the driver of the vehicle, you keep the damn keys on your body, on your person. You leave your keys in your vehicle and some kind of crap starts happening, the scared people are going to jump in your vehicle and lock your damn doors, and they will not unlock them to let you in. Trust me on that. Trust me on that. I've seen it happen time and time and time again to people.
Right. Well, we are right at the mark. Like I said, guys, I feel honored. I hope you guys all enjoyed Mr. Tim Coonbo Baker coming on. And he was gracious enough to agree to come back sometime. Thank you for coming on. It was really an honor, and I know that, you're a busy guy. And so,
it's an honor for me.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah. And, I mean, like I said, I'm interested in sharing my knowledge.
Yes, sir.
Another little tidbit that part of my story here should illustrate is you should always be, any good researcher is willing to go back and relook at their data and change their mind.
Yeah.
Based on new evidence.
Always be open-minded, because,
right.
And I've always said, I don't know anything. I'm always learning. That night that you and I spoke, I felt like some of the stuff I thought I knew, but really didn't know, just got tossed out of the window. And you've got to be really open-minded, because it's a subject based on theory and hands-on. I mean, unfortunately, like you said, the government is not going to give us one of these bodies or anything. We're not going to know the biology of these creatures for a very long time, if ever. So, I mean, you just got to be really open-minded. So, that 3 hours that I spent with you on the phone was a really good educational learning for me, and I appreciated it.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate the compliment. I tell a lot of things, but there are a few things secrets I hold close to my chest, because I have to have some way of evaluating, things that people tell me, and knowing whether they're blowing smoke or telling the truth. And but I have learned that some of the things that people tell me that I've sort of blew off at the time, I got to go back and look at that again. In fact, I went back and re-interviewed those people back in 19. I didn't get to do it right away, but in 1985 or 86, I went back and re-interviewed those folks that I had interviewed back in 1978 that had where the as we know now, the Dogman looked in the kitchen window at them, and they were like, "Well, we tried to tell you." I said, "Well, I just didn't know," Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I definitely gotta cut the podcast short for right now, but I will still be able to give you a couple minutes of my time.
Sure.
Everybody have a great night. And Mr. Coonbo, would you like to say goodnight to everybody?
Yes. Good night, folks. It's been, like I said, it's been my pleasure to get to talk to you guys tonight.
All right, folks. This is part 2 of the amazing interview with Tim Coonbo Baker.
Tim, how are you tonight?
Doing very well, thank you.
Thank you for finding some time out of your busy schedule. I know you're a busy guy, so I really appreciate this.
Yeah, no problem.
I know we really don't have kind of a plan of what's going to be tonight. We got a couple of things that we want to talk about. I think we'll just dive right into it. What you addressed when we first started the conversation off with, and I'll put the picture in the video so you guys can see it. Someone sent me a picture of supposedly the crime scene at the LBL, and I shared it with you a while back, and to get your input on it. So then your input was what, sir?
Well, I looked it over pretty good, and looked real familiar to me because growing up, one of my friend's parents had an old Winnebago RV, and this thing looked like it. So I got to digging around, and I figured out that the RV that's in that picture that you sent me is around a 1973, 1974 Winnebago Indian D22. And I was able to scale off of it and nail down the exact model by the windows and the distance from the little overhead vent door to the main door, and the location of a little light beside the door. And there were several things in the picture where I was able to nail down the exact model that it was. Okay. And that tells me that this is not the RV that was involved in the LBL a Dogman attack that happened around the mid 80s, around 83, 84, 85 time frame. Okay. I know that the people that were killed then, they were pretty well to do, and they had according to my friend who was a ranger there and in LBL back during the 90s and later until he retired, that he that the people were well to do, and they had a very new, very modern RV of the day, which would have been, like I said, it would have been at least a 10-year newer model. Right. And even supposing that it was a Winnebago, even still that brand, if you go and look at Winnebagos from that time period, from the early to mid 80s, they are way different looking than the one that's in the picture. Right. And another thing too, in the picture, the text that's on there where it says evidence photo across the bottom, mm-hmm. that has been photoshopped on there, or somebody's done that on a computer. That wasn't actually written on there. Okay. That was not written on the photo itself. Now that is an old. The photo is made to look like an old Polaroid, color right. picture. So and I don't know. There may be a dead body that laying there. I mean, that may not have been photoshopped in. That might be an authentic crime scene photo. Right. But it's not from the incident, the famous incident in the LBL. Yeah, I can tell you that.
And that encounter is so famous, but there's so many different stories and variations of the stories, and
Lord, yeah.
I mean, I could count on both hands and still, use a couple toes, mm-hmm. How many times I've heard different variations of that story. So,
mm-hmm. Right.
It just...
And, as many times as I have been up there are still some things that I want to investigate and some places that I want to go. There, if I can, find some other, a couple other good researchers that got the guts to go in there with me. I mean, I know a few. We just hadn't gotten the chance to do it because every time we go in there, we learn something. Yep. And what is so funny is I got a phone call from someone here not long ago, and they were saying that this person had said that there wasn't ever an RV park there and all this kind of stuff. Well, let me tell you, I can take you in there. I can show you where each one of the slots were, or the spaces were. I can show you the corner stakes are still there. the plumbing is still there. The power cables are still there. I mean, it's extremely evident,
right,
if you know what to look for, where the park was.
Yeah, I mean, Mother Nature's going to reclaim it, so there's going to be you know, evidence there. You just got to look.
Exactly. So that's and I've taken. There's a lot of people out there that I have taken in there, you know, myself personally. That, and you know, even the ones that are somewhat doubters, once I showed them, showed them the place, they're like, "Whoa, okay, yeah, definitely, this is definitely an RV park, you know, an RV campground."
Right. But, was there electrical hookups back then in there?
Yep,
okay.
Sure were. There was electrical and water.
Yeah, so I mean, there's going to be, like you said, corner markers and stuff like that.
Right.
You know,
exactly. And there were bathhouses. There were multiple bathhouses in there. And now, I will give you the place is pretty. Part of the place is pretty rugged for an RV park. I'd hate to try to. I don't know. I guess the road was in a lot better shape then, but with the large RVs now that they make now would have a hard time negotiating the eastern end of the park.
Okay.
So there were some pretty steep hills in there. However, the family that got killed, they did not go down in that part of the park. They were up near the top part of it.
Okay.
You know, where it was, and they were in the slot that they were in, or the spot that they were in was, if you came in at the angle that the thing was built, it was fairly level. It was a good spot. I could very easily, even today, get my RV in there.
Right.
And I don't. In fact, I could even get my old one in there. I used to have a 34-foot fifth wheel, and I've downsized, and I've got a 24-foot bumper pull now. But I could have gotten either one of them in there easily. And hell, my sister and brother-in-law, I might be able even to get their big bus in there. But,
That's funny. Well, you've got one. One volunteer right here. I'll drive south and meet you if you ever want to go. So, there's a lot of speculation and questions because a lot of people that are into cryptozoology don't have the time, money, or like you said, courage to go into those woods. And there's that abandoned, what I guess they call Hotel California out there. What is that supposed to be? That? Oh,
it was a really, really nice private home. I mean, I've been in there. I've walked all through it. Most of they've torn down most of it now.
Okay.
But it was a really nice home there near the waterfront, in the northeast part of the park.
Okay.
And of course they bought everybody. The government, when they developed LBL back in the early 1960s, they bought out all the property and condemned everybody's property, paid them for it, and they had to leave. So there were lots of homes that were just walked away from. And this was a very, really fancy place. And it was big, and the people that owned it, they liked to party and stuff, and there was a lot of room in it. That's how come I got the name Hotel California.
Okay.
And it looked out over Lake Barkley.
Yeah.
And it was big enough that when you pulled into the driveway of the place, there was people say it was, call it a bunker. No, it's not a bunker. There was a nice big concrete block or a brick well house there.
Okay.
And that's all it was a well house. And and then you went past the well house and you drove down to the house. Of course, that's all that's blocked off now. But it's been so disfigured and torn up, and parts of it torn down, and stuff over the years that it's changed a lot. And and of course, kids get in there and they spray paint all kind of crazy stuff all over it, and they try to make it look like some kind of a horror place or a devil worshippers place. But there's really it does attract a lot of crazy people. So I personally wouldn't go down there by myself, unarmed.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been down there by myself before, but like I said, I was properly armed, and I'm not advocating going out into on national recreation areas toting guns all over the place.
No, absolutely.
But like I said, there is a crazy element that likes to hang out down there now. I'll tell you that. And I have not. The last time I went there was a lot more of it left than what there is now. I've seen more recent pictures, and they've torn down most of the second story of the place. It's gone, and a lot of the and parts of the lower level of it are pretty much destroyed.
Right.
But there's enough of it left that that there was something there, something pretty impressive there at one time.
Yeah.
But it's just it was a hangout for years, just for people, the locals, kids, and stuff like that. People go there and hang out or camp out there, spend the night there. Sit around, drink beer, build a campfire, that kind of stuff. But then they got a crazy element that started going there and trying to make something else out of it. But,
right.
But I can tell you this: I've never had any Bigfoot activity anywhere around it, anywhere near it.
Right.
And
now that place is steeped with just urban legend, and I think a lot of it, like when you just stated that the military purchased it, and I think in like 1963 or somewhere around there. What was the purpose of the purchase? Was it to turn it into a preserve, or?
Well, they were going to turn it into a national recreation area.
Okay.
And I mean, I guess the purpose of it was to turn it into what it is today. Now, there was an area there in the north end where there was a National Guard training area. It's what I was told that it used to be, and I've been in it. And there are some bunkers there. There were some bunkers, but this is miles away from what they call the Hotel California or the Devil Inn or Devil's Inn or whatever I've heard other people call it.
Right.
But it's miles from that. But there was a bunker area that and the bunkers were arranged so that they had overlapping fields of fire, and they weren't built to kill that. Some people say, they built them when they were trying to hunt down all the Dogmen and kill them so they get them in overlapping fields of fire. No, they were not. Those things were there since the 1950s.
Okay.
And or early 60s. I've seen them. I've been in them, but they're gone now. They came in there. There was so much crap going on again with those things. People coming in there that I don't know, 10 years ago maybe, something like that. They got in there and I guess they got in there with big dozers or huge big track hose or whatever. And the last time I went up in there, you had to park and then walk up an old road bed. Had a cable across the road, and I walked up in there, and they were just, you could see where the place had been torn up, and the remains of the thing, the big chunks of concrete, were just in 2 or 3, big old piles up there in the area.
Right.
And it was all grown up and everything. And the last time I was there at LBL, I went up in there, and unfortunately, it was on up in the late spring, and everything was greened up good, and the ticks and the bugs and the chiggers and stuff were out. And I went up to the old road that went up in that area, and it was grown up, knee deep and weeds and stuff, and I didn't have a 55-gallon drum of insect repellent to bathe in before I went up there, and so I didn't walk up to the old place to look at it again.
All right.
But me and Chiggers don't get along too well.
Yeah.
Chiggers and I don't get along too well.
I don't think they get along too well with anybody.
Yeah.
But it's definitely an interesting place. It'll be, that, excuse me, that terrible event will always be remembered, and
right.
There'll always be speculation and stories, untrue or true, surrounding that area.
Right.
So, the other day, getting off that place, moving on to a different place, I had done a upload about my neck of the woods, and I had talked about it with you, the 1976 Goslin experience in Whitehall, New York, where the Whitehall police officer and his little brother all saw a Sasquatch. Have you ever gotten a chance to come up here and check out anything up here in regards to that?
Well, it's been years ago. The last time I was up in that area would have been in up there actually researching Bigfoot. Would have been in the early '90s.
Okay.
And I spent most of my time in the Bennington Triangle area, New Hampshire, and up along the east side of Lake Champlain and up towards Green Mountain and that area, and then I went up through Maine on a 3-day weekend, and that we had, and I took out and I went way up by myself, way up on a bunch of the logging roads in Maine, and went all the way up to the Canadian border to a little town that supposedly the Beatles met up there. That there's a little tavern up there where the border between the USA and Canada goes right through it.
Okay.
And it's actually painted on the floor. And one of the Beatles couldn't come into the U.S. or he was going to be arrested, and another one couldn't go out of the U.S. or he wouldn't be allowed to come back or something like that. I don't remember. I can't remember the Beatles' history, but they met there in this little tavern.
Okay.
And I talked to some of the folks that I worked with up there in New Hampshire, and they told me how to, where the place was, and I figured out how to get there. And I took off on a 3-day weekend, drove all over the place up in there. Went up to, what is that big state park? Baxter Mountain. Went up through Baxter Mountain State Park up in Maine, and went through some really, really remote areas. And I came back to work Tuesday. I was doing a bunch of work on the reactor control system at Seabrook Nuclear Plant up there on the coast of New Hampshire at the time. That's why I was up there. And anyway, when I got back to work Tuesday morning and I was telling the guys where I went and what I did, they all looked at me like I was crazy. And one of the guys said, "You are an idiot. You went up there by yourself?" "Yeah." They said, "You were," and they got to tell me and all the people that disappeared up there, and that you break down and you starve to death before anybody find you, and all kind of crap. And well, I had taken plenty of food and some supplies and stuff with me, but they are correct.
Yeah.
One day I drove all day, and never saw another car, never saw another human being. That was weird.
Yeah, it is weird. It's a very, I have family that live up there in northern Maine, not just like York, like when you enter Maine, like close to Acadia National Park. And
right.
I have my aunt is friends with a guy who lives up in Lubec, which is close to the Canadian border, and there are puffins that literally walk around the roads out there, and population like 100. And
Yeah.
you know, it's a very beautiful but very secluded area, and prime location for Sasquatch, definitely.
Yeah. Well, the only thing I saw, and I stopped several places and I called and I actually spent one night there in Baxter Mountain State Park, and but I got out and I called and everything, and I never got even the slightest kind of an answer, and I never saw any evidence, never saw any sign, and I was sort of disappointed, to tell you the truth, but it was still beautiful country, really interesting. It was amazing, some of those roads, how many miles you'd have to drive to get around one lake.
Yeah.
That was, but I drove up to on the way up there. Let's see here, I'm digging out one of my old maps here. Let me see, turn on the light here so I can read it. Yeah, there's Baxter Mountain. I drove all the way up to Millinocket, I think that's the name of the place.
Okay.
And the first day I left out down. I left out from Seabrook and drove all the way up and made it all the way to Baxter State Park that evening, and camped up there, and then left there and drove around. Of course, a lot of these roads are just logging roads,
mm-hmm.
and they're closed a large part of the year. And I came up on several places. You know, I managed to get a hold of some halfway decent maps, but there were a number of the roads I tried to use that were closed, and you know, it was this is back map and compass days, you know, and I did a lot of navigating via map and compass. But man, I saw some beautiful country.
Yeah.
And what was weird, I didn't see a single bear, not one, and I only saw one moose. And I remember I was in a rental car that had like Florida plates on it or some kind of bullshit like that. I'd rented the thing in Boston, but I think it had like Florida plates or Georgia plates or something on it. And on the way back on Monday, I was in the freaking middle of nowhere, and I was on this road that kept going around in amongst these lakes, and I got to a point where I was afraid I was going to have to be driving through water, but the road was this gravel road was just barely above the water level of the lake. I got out and walked over it and make sure it was, you know, solid enough to support the car, and then it was really the road. So I drive, and it turned out it was, and I got across it, and I came around a little curve, and there was an old beat-up, like a Toyota Land Cruiser sitting there, and there was this old fella out there, and he was, like I said, I'm 65 now. At the time, I was thinking, you know, an old fart, you know, he was 65 or 70 years old. He was about the age I am now, and he was out there fishing. And I pulled over, and the guy looked around, and he saw those plates on my car, and he said, "Buddy, are you lost?" and man, I was wishing I had a rod and reel with me, because he was catching some nice trout.
Yeah,
on a spinning reel, rather than a fly rod.
Beautiful sportsman. You know, it's a perfect sportsman paradise up there. So, yep.
But you know, talking about exploring, you know, researching in that area, I had seen reports and stuff and heard about the stuff going on over there in New Hampshire and stuff around the Bennington area, and you know, even back in the 90s, I was hearing about that from different people, and so I took off over in that area, and now I had never heard the term Bennington Triangle at that time.
Okay.
I just knew that Bennington was a weird place, and was a lot of stuff. There'd been a fair amount of sightings and stuff in the area, and that there were weird things, supposedly a lot of UFO sightings and things. And I drove over there, and I drove into the town, and we just went riding around, exploring around. I was trying to find a road that a fellow had told me about, and he'd given me a pretty good description of it. And I was supposed to look for this one particular old abandoned building, and then turn just east of that building, sort of to the northeast, and follow a creek bed. Or follow the road went along the west side of a creek. I found it, and so I'm driving up through there, and he had told me, he said the really weird thing about it was that that there were these really nice, beautiful homes along this road that it looked like the people had just picked up and walked out of, and that there were furniture still in them and all this. They were still furnished, but nobody had been in them for decades. And I found 2 or 3 of those old homes like that. And I drove up in the driveway of one of them, and got out and looked. And what was crazy, they hadn't been vandalized or anything, but you could, I was able to look through the windows, and a few of the windows in the place was completely furnished, beautiful furniture and everything. And I was just astounded that the place that they weren't vandalized.
Yeah.
And they were still locked up tight. Now this would have been in around 93, 94 time frame. And then there was a house next door to it that I actually had driven past it before I turned up the driveway of the one that I first stopped at. So I walked through a bunch of weeds and stuff, and after spraying down good with DEET, with a good muskal insect repellent that y'all have up there that we can't get down here.
Yeah.
But anyway, I walked over to it, and it was empty. There was nobody there, but it was fairly empty. But it was a nice house too, and it was just really surprising that there was nobody living up there. The road went on beyond that, and I started up through there, and there were some houses up in at least one that I saw that was back off the road a little ways, and it looked like something out of a horror movie. All these trees and brush growing up around it, and I stopped, and I was going to get out and go up there, and I'm thinking, well, I'm by myself. I'm not armed, and I just got a real creepy feeling. So I got back in the car, and I tried to go on up further, and the road just sort of petered out. It got pretty rough. It hadn't been maintained or anything, and looked like the only thing been up through there were maybe Jeeps and trucks and maybe dirt bikes or something. But it was not good to drive on.
No, most definitely.
Yeah, but I'll say this. I'm trying to find on the map what the name of the place was. Dadgummit. I went through Bennington, and there is a mountain out north of town. That's supposedly where a bunch of UFO activity went on. I stayed in a little town past Bennington, out to the west, and I don't remember the name of it. Let's see.
I think it's Arlington. West.
And this is such a bad map that I have here that I can't even find Bennington on it. I got Manchester, Concord. Anyway, I stayed in a little town out on the other side of Bennington, out to the west or sort of northwest. And I went out that night, rooting around, and I will say this, up on Bennington Mountain, up at the top, I couldn't see it directly, but there were a bunch of lights up there, a bunch of flashing lights. They were like flashing up in there. It almost looked like somebody was welding. And there were all these, flashes of light coming up out of the trees up towards the top of the mountain. Now, I'm not saying I didn't see anything moving or anything like that, any kind of spacecraft there, anything like that. It could have been just kids up there four-wheel driving and going up and down over the rocks and all the, they had all these, souped up lights and stuff on them. Those could have been just flashing up there. That's what I figured it was. But there was definitely something going on up on that mountain. I'll say that. But I did not feel that it was UFOs or anything like that. And I have spent some time up there actually, rooting around and doing some calling and stuff like that. Again, no response whatsoever.
Okay.
And I went up to, I had read a bunch of stuff about and heard several things about sightings up around Green Mountain in Vermont. And I went up there one weekend and spent a couple of days up in that area. Again, never found a thing. I did talk to a couple of people though that were from up there, and I made contact with a guy, and he took me out and showed me where he'd had an encounter, and around on the north side of Green Mountain, and it was definitely boogery looking country, and it was the right kind of habitat, and I have no doubt that the place, I'm sure that the place, if there were any in there, that'd be a good place for them.
Okay.
They'd be quite at home there. But but I just didn't, I didn't find any evidence, no tracks or anything like that. Didn't hear anything. Spend a night up there one night, out, and I just. But those woods the woods and everything are so vast up there.
Yeah.
That you just have to be at the right place at the right time to stumble across them.
Yeah.
And
it's a different kind of woods up here,
yeah.
than other parts
Yeah.
of the country. It's a very dense, different varieties of trees and just
right.
Hills, rocks. It's a very
extremely rough.
Yeah.
I mean, you get off the beaten path, and it'll take you 45 minutes to go 150 yards.
Yep.
Through that stuff. I mean, it's unbelievable.
And just sheer, you go walking straight, and you go up a hill, and there's just sheer drops, from where the mountain is cracked.
Exactly.
And it's definitely a rough land up here. But beautiful.
Yeah, exceedingly rough.
Yeah.
That's what really surprised me. Now, and it was a totally different. Maine wasn't near as rough as northern Vermont, and New Hampshire. They were much rougher country, and woods were way more dense than I had expected them to be. And I was and just because I didn't find anything at the time doesn't mean that they're not up there. And that place you could hide 100,000 of them in there, and if they didn't want anybody to see them, they wouldn't get seen.
Right. Now, when you were calling them, were you were just using your call, or were you using?
Yeah, just my mouth. Yeah, just using regular calls that I've taught myself over the years.
When did you start using
I'd love to go back up there and use some of the methods that I've got now.
Yeah, well, anytime you want, I've got an extra room here for you. You can more than welcome to stay, and we'll go up there. When did you start using your new method, where you kind of started the Jewish horn or whatever thing that you were talking about last time?
When did I start doing that?
Yeah.
Oh, about 3 years, about 3 or 4. We've been playing around with the idea. I mean, we've been studying this for years,
okay.
and I'm not the one that came up with this. Mark Maychek is the brains behind this, and he's had this idea and been studying it for years, way ahead of before anybody else even dreamed of it.
Right.
And he's an exceedingly sharp guy. And he got to telling me about it, and I got to studying about it, and I was very, very intrigued, and I decided, well, if in fact, he first said it. He said, if we can get our hands on one of these, and if we do it, if we can figure out the right way to do it, he said, it'll get results if these things are what we think they are. That they are somehow connected to the Nephilim.
Right.
And so I got to looking around, and lo and behold, my wife found one in an antique shop.
That's awesome.
And I bought it, and the rest is history. And it took me a year to learn how to blow the thing correctly. It took a year, and I mean times that I was getting blood blisters on my lips, and it's a wonder I hadn't got emphysema, because that thing, it is not easy. You're not going to just pick one up and mess with it for an hour and do anything that'll bring a Bigfoot running.
Right.
And another thing too, we still don't know how safe this is.
Yeah.
The times that I've been able to do it, get it right, they did come charging in, and they come running in hard and fast until they get to the point where they can lay eyeballs on you, and then they just slam on the brakes and stop, and just stand there and watch you. And but I just, there's no way that I'll go out doing the thing, by myself, because we don't know what'll happen if you get a hold of a bad one.
Right.
And I mean, we had one come up behind us. We were up on the Mississippi River, and there's an island, a particular island up there that I've been hearing about, a lot of activity on this island and the river. I've been hearing about this since back in the 90s. And so we got up there, and we managed to get around and find a road that went down, got us to the waterfront, and we were underneath a big high bank, a bank about 12 feet tall. And I thought, well, this is great, because that'll sort of reflect the sound over there. Whatever sound that we can get, it's going to throw it really good out all the way across the river. And so I managed to get a couple of good blasts out of the thing, and the right frequency and everything. And the next thing we know, we hear something behind us and look. And I mean, right up above us. We were right at the base of this bank. And I'm standing there at the top of the bank. There was one standing there looking down on us. Absolutely scared the crap out of us. But it was just standing there looking at us.
Wow.
It didn't growl at us. It didn't do anything. It looked at us a little bit, and it just turned around and walked away. And, of course, everywhere with no damn cameras or anything. And,
so is that where the whole background of that horn came from? Mark kind of like used the biblical sense of... Yep. Okay.
Yep. And it took me, and then I spent a good bit of time talking with some serious scholars of Jewish scholars, and one of them was actually he was presented to me as by other people as a Jewish mystic.
Okay.
And he's the one that really gave me enough information. He didn't just give it to me; I had to work for it. But he gave me enough clues that I was able to find the information and do some experimentation and figure out how to make it work. And but it took, even after I had the thing in my hands, it took over a year to figure out how to use it and make it work.
Okay.
And and the first time that it ever worked was up in Iowa, and that I was able to do it right. And this is a place that I'd been, and I'd been calling and calling, trying to blow that damn thing. There's a place where I had gotten run out of before in the years previous. So I knew they were in there. And but I'd been there several times, so they knew me. So, you know, it's like I tell people, if you go into an area where they haven't been messed with much and you do a good call, you know, you're going to get the attention of the alpha. He's going to say, all right, who the heck is this intruder in on my territory? And Mr. Big Boy himself is going to come see what the hell's going on, and he's going to set you straight that that's his territory. Well, that happened to me the very first time that I went up into this area, and but I've been back several times since then. And you know, after that, it's oh, we know that guy. You know, I ain't going out there. You know, well, you kids go out there and mess with him, so that, you know, you might get a little bit of juvie activity, and that's about it.
What was he bluff charging you?
The first time I went up there, yeah, I got charged, and I was by myself, and I stood my ground until they got close enough I could see them. I clicked on about a 3 million count power spotlight and caught 3 of them. Yeah, actually I caught 5 of them. 3 in one place and 2 to the left of them, about 30, 40 yards. Coming at me pretty hard and fast. When I put the light on them, they slammed on the brakes, which gave me enough time to get in the truck and open up a large can of gone.
Right. Yeah.
And my old dog Bo was still alive then, and he had already abandoned me. he was in the floorboard of the truck whining already, wanting to get the hell out of Dodge. And but anyway, I had never gotten any more results anywhere similar to that. But when I went and I you know, took the horn with me, and I finally got it to work. Finally. It was like you threw a switch. The woods just erupted. Unbelievable. And I'd been up there screwing around for 45 minutes. And and I figured I'd already run anything that was there, I'd already run them off. Right. No, they were probably sitting there, you know, that asshole, would he shut up and leave us alone, you know? It's kind of a deal. And then when I hit it, it was instantaneous. And it was pretty amazing. And there was a fellow researcher, and a researcher from Iowa was with me, and he's like, well, he had a pretty good long line of expletives that I will not repeat here.
Right. But it must be fulfilling all at the same sense. I mean, yeah, terrifying, but you know, like you said, it's just a great feeling because you're actually you've succeeded in bringing them to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had a you know, I started up there. I went up there by myself that particular night, and then he said, hey, you know, and I had talked to him on the phone on the way up, and he was tied up at work, and so I was up there, and I was, you know, down in this pretty deep creek valley, or, you know, creek bottom, and my cell phone rang a time or two, and I thought it was him trying to call me, and so I got in the truck and drove up out of there where I could get cell reception. Talked to him, and he said, hey, you know, he was only about 30 miles away. And he said, I hadn't had supper, but I just got off work. And he said, where are you? And I told him, and he said, all right, meet me such and such a place. So I went and I met him, and we grabbed some supper, and then we jumped in my truck, and off back down we went where I'd already been. And we, like I said, I wrestled with that thing for quite a while. Still couldn't do anything. And I don't know what happened, but I'd been putting chapstick on my lips, and my lips are getting really parched and dry, and I said, I ain't putting any more chapstick on, and so I just I cut loose on it again, and man, I hit the right. I just hit the right note for about 3 or 4 seconds. And like I said, just like you flipped the switch. And unbelievable responses from 2 or 3 different directions.
That's amazing.
And we started hearing stuff coming towards us. I mean, fast coming towards us. And he was, over there and yanked the truck door open and had one foot up in the floorboard of the truck, ready to get the hell out of Dodge. And he said, "Hey, come on, man, we got to go." And I said, hang on. And another thing too, it doesn't just turn on the boogers when you do it right. There was a pack of coyotes went bonzo right up the road. In fact, when we cranked the truck up to get out of there finally, and this was, we didn't run off. They didn't scare us off or anything like that. They just came up and just stopped and got quiet, and we couldn't get them to come any closer. But we shined around. We were getting little glimpses of eye shine and stuff like that. So we were able to figure out that what was going on, and we were catching them in our thermal and just glimpses of them and stuff, and we realized that they had come to a point and they weren't going to come any closer. Sort of like when you're turkey hunting, and you're calling a big gobbler in, and he gets to a point and then he hangs up, and no matter what you do, he's not going to come any further. So we had this went on for 30 minutes or more, and we got ready to leave, and we'd heard all these coyotes up the road west of us that just went ape when I finally was able to blow it right. When we started to leave, the truck was pointed west, and so I cranked up and I went up the road, came around a curve, and there was a whole pack of coyotes in the road milling around.
Wow.
And yeah, that was sort of weird.
Yeah, definitely.
And we sort of wondered if maybe the boogers had been after the coyotes and they were sort of out in the road, so they'd get a little. This place is really thick also. We were sort of wondering if they were maybe out in the road, so they get a little bit of a buffer zone, visibility buffer zone between them and the boogers.
Right.
The boogers at certain times of the year really love to kill the coyotes.
Okay.
But,
kind of give the coyotes an advantage to see them coming at least and get them.
Exactly. Well, it's the same thing as what we do. I do not like to call from a place where the woods and everything and all the high vegetation is right up there close to us. I like to have a little buffer zone of open ground. Even if it's only 30, 40 feet.
Right.
Where I can see them. Have a little split second chance of seeing them, because hell, we've had them bust out right on top of us before, and that's not.
That must be absolutely terrifying.
The story sounds good telling it later on, but when it's happening, it's not very fun.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what they're going to do.
That must be terrifying, because you don't have any time. Like you said, you need that buffer zone to see kind of. And even if it's only a split second, at least your mind kind of puts a plan together,
Mm-hmm.
And wow,
yeah.
That must have been a terrifying.
Yeah.
What state did that happen in?
This was in Iowa, southeastern Iowa, or excuse me, not south. This was in eastern Iowa, where we finally got it to work the first time.
Okay.
And then I started trying to practice with it, and problem I found was trying to find a place that I could practice that I wasn't stirring them up. And while I was playing around with the thing, just trying to do different things with it, you can blow one of the damn things and make it sound just like an old bullhorn, like we used to use for calling the dogs when we were coon hunting.
Okay. And
I was playing around. I actually used it rather than I've got a bullhorn, but I actually used it rather than my bullhorn to call the dogs a few times. And then they came into it. But then I ended up with a booger in the backyard a couple of nights later. And not only in the backyard, came right up on the deck and looked in the bedroom door at us.
Jeez, I'm crying.
We had a deck, and we're laying there sound asleep in the bed about 1:30 in the morning, and all of a sudden, our female German Shepherd just went ballistic, and she and the other two male shepherds just nearly took the south wall of the house out. Nearly took the whole door out of the side of the house, and they were going crazy. I thought, what in the hell? And I sat up in bed, and we got motion lights out there, and there were the damn boogers standing there on the deck, looking in the door. And when I raised up in the bed, did it, but because we didn't have any lights on in the bedroom, somehow it saw me. I don't know if it just saw the extra motion or whatever, but it saw me, and it whirled and went running down the deck. And I mean, that thing, I don't know what the thing weighed, but I figured it weighed over 500 pounds anyway, because it shook the house when it went running. And the deck is, from the point that it took off to the far end of the deck, where the stairs are that go out into the yard, is 60-something feet, about 63 feet, roughly 62 to 65 feet.
Wow.
And it shook the house every time its foot hit the deck. And later on, and I mean, my wife heard all this stuff too. And so the next morning, we're talking about it and everything, and she's mad at me for calling the thing up there, to the house accidentally and scaring her half to death and scaring the dogs and everything. And the dogs really weren't scared. They wanted a piece of it because it was trespassing in their territory. And but I got out there and jumped up and down on the deck as hard as I could, and she said I wasn't even close to jarring the place like that booger did. And I went running down the deck in big high jumps, and hitting as hard as I could. And she said that was nothing. She said it was not even remotely similar to when the booger ran off.
So he was huge.
And then the next day, to add insult to injury, that afternoon we were out working in the yard, and I found a trackway where it had come up from the creek there on the back of the place, and it had come up in the yard. We'd been having some rain. I found a pretty good little trackway. And one of the tracks, it was a 17-inch track, or 17 and a half inch track, right in the middle of my wife's little miniature hosta bed. She collects miniature hosta plants,
okay.
And she had I built her this nice 3-level bed out there in the backyard, and it stepped right in the middle of one of those hosta beds and mashed some of her little, pretty rare miniature hostas. And I caught the dickens for that too. And before she got mad enough before I could I was going to try to cast the tracks, and she tore the track up. She pissed off at me.
Yeah.
And, but, so the agreement was made then that there would be no more blowing the thing around, no more, doing that to call the dogs, and no more practicing around the house, no more any of that anywhere on our property.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I noticed in the comment section, because like I said, I was talking to you, and a person actually said the same thing I was thinking, and something that made complete sense to me when you shared it with me was the fact that there's 4 varieties of Bigfoot, Dogman being the 4th. And, since that day, that's my go-to now, and a lot of people, like you just said, think these things are Nephilim related. And I've heard, I've had a couple people talking, and that think like, okay, well, if the Sasquatch is the Nephilim or related to, will not say the, but related to, then possibly the Dogman and the third variant of this would almost be like a chimera. Where did you come up with the idea of the four being, related? Where did that come from?
Well, like I said, I've been studying these things, and I mean, I saw my first one when I was 4 years old, and right outside my bedroom window.
Wow.
And I've heard about them from my grandparents. My dad told me a little bit about them. It didn't take me very long to figure out that there were two different kinds. The ones that are on our farm are the type ones. They're the big ones, like in the Patterson Gimlin film, the patty type we call them. But then in other places, the descriptions of them and what I eventually later saw for myself, they're a little shorter, they're skinnier, and their head is shaped somewhat different, and they seem to be a little bit more belligerent, a little bit more aggressive. And so, they're the ones I call now the Neanderthal type or type 2.
Right.
So I knew that, and now I also knew in areas where I had, spent years of my life and been studying these things and watching them and calling them and, tried to have, and they knew me, and that I noticed that they didn't really mix, that they remained distinctly different over decades of time.
Okay.
And even though they lived in amongst each other. Now, down here in the South, the type 1s are by far the least common of the two major types, the type 1, type 2. The swamp ape type, Neanderthal type, they are much more prevalent. And now, how we ended up with the type 1s on our farm, I don't know. But it's just the way it is. And but I learned about the two different kinds. But from the time I started seriously studying these things and talking to people and taking down sighting reports and stuff in the late 1970s, the very first report that I ever took from somebody where I sat down with them and they told me what they'd seen, and I talked to the mother and both of the sons and took their report. It didn't jive with anything I'd seen or heard of. Well, excuse me, I had heard some stuff, but it didn't jive with anything that I had seen before. And but I didn't know what else could it be. And this was in about 1978 that I took this report. And then fast forward to 1984. And I've heard more about these things, and I've heard people talk about this thing that the locals, someone would call him the Goat Man. Okay. Others would call him, what was our next one? He called him a haint dog. I had Mr. Morrison on the farm next door to us. He was talking about seeing this big, huge, dog-like creature, dog-headed creature, and he called it a haint dog. And a haint's a country word for ghost or demon or something like that.
Right.
And I would hear that stuff, and then I heard I had one guy give me a really good description of this thing he called a Goat Man, and how the back legs were made, how it looked like that they bent backwards, and a bunch of stuff like that, and how the fur laid on the legs, and he'd seen it run off down the road, and then I talked to a guy that was a cook at a sportsman's club, at a hunting club, and that this thing would come up and raid their they didn't have dumpsters in. They had big 55-gallon drums that throw all their garbage in. And how this thing would come up and raid the garbage cans and stuff. And I was hearing these descriptions, and I'm thinking, what the heck is that? And then in 1984, and by this time I was working for NASA, and we had a big project going, and we were getting ready for the very first Department of Defense, classified mission that the shuttle was going to fly. And they were building a huge ground station and a bunch of communication and data storage, recording and storage facility there at Redstone Arsenal or Marshall Space Flight Center.
Okay.
And I was one of the lead engineers on the thing. And we had a contractor down in South Alabama and was building a lot of that equipment for us. And we were staying in Troy, Alabama, and working up towards to the northeast near a little place called Union Springs. And I started hearing a lot of reports of things going on, Bigfoot activity around Troy, Alabama. That's where I first heard about what now people call urban Bigfoot. Bigfoot regularly coming into urban areas after hours to raid dumpsters and stuff like that. And I started hearing a lot of reports of that. Well, then I think I may have related the story to you before. I know that anybody that's listened to me very much has heard me tell the story. Had a couple of ladies that worked for me.
Yep.
That came to work, and these were very, very highly educated electronic technicians. They were building a lot of this equipment for us and putting it together and testing it and such, and helping us test it. And very, very intelligent, well-educated, highly skilled ladies. They came to work one morning, and as we were having our kickoff meeting, which we'd have every morning at 7, we'd talk with the night shift folks and update us on what they got done and problems they found, and then I'd lay out the work, what we were going to get done for that day, and who was going to do what, and all. And these two ladies were really upset. I mean, really upset. They were totally distracted. They weren't listening to anything that I was saying. And so after we got a kickoff meeting, I asked them to, hang back. So I said, what's the matter, ladies? Well, one of them was in tears. I said, if you had a death in the family, do you need to take off? What's going on? And they didn't want to talk. And I'm thinking, I said, were you robbed? Did something happen? And they drove every day. In fact, I was staying in a motel in Troy, and they lived in Troy. And we were driving every day up to a place out in the country outside of Union Springs. And it's pretty long drive on U.S. Highway 29, which winds and twists around through the countryside there. And shut the door and sit down. I said, ladies, y'all can't go out there and work on this in this kind of shape. Do you need to have the day off? Do you need to just go home, take a day off? No. I said, well, tell me what's the matter. Well, you won't believe this. And I said, you'd be surprised what I'll believe. And, because I didn't nobody knew about my interest in Bigfoot at that time, and with the government, where I worked. And so I said, well, what happened? And, well, we had something bad happen on the way to work. And so I thought maybe they'd been robbed or somebody ran them off the road. I didn't know what. So I got the question, well, that wasn't it. And one of the ladies, she was crying. She kept getting more and more upset. I said, look, just tell me. I said, I'll keep it secret. Just tell me what you saw. And just tell me what happened. And said, well, we saw
a monster on the road, or no, she said, we saw a werewolf on the road. I said, really? And she said, yes. And I don't remember the exact words of the conversation, but they still were reluctant to open up. So I went out to my car, and opened the trunk of my car, got out one of my journals, one of my log books, brought it in, and let them just open up and look at some of that stuff. I let them read a couple of my Bigfoot reports that I had taken. And some of them, the straw that broke the camel's back for them, or that led them where they recognized the name of one of the people that I had interviewed there that had an encounter in there outside of Troy. They recognized the name. And when they saw that gave them the impetus to open up to me. And they were coming to work, and they described it perfectly. They came around a curve, and they saw it coming up out of a creek bed on the right-hand side of the road, and it walked up onto the shoulder of the road right and stopped right on the shoulder beside a curve sign, and it just stopped and was staring at them. And the lady that was the passenger, that was on the passenger side of the front seat, she was the one that was by far the most upset. And she said that they both said the thing was just unbelievably evil, and that it had just an evil aura about it, or persona about it, that was just absolutely palpable. And the lady that was in the passenger seat that was crying so badly, she said the thing looked her right in the eyes and was trying to suck her soul out of her body, is what she said. And the lady that was driving, it scared her, and she slammed on the brakes and came almost to a complete stop. And the thing, she said, it sort of leaned forward a little bit and was looking down and looking right in the car at them through the windshield. And the lady in the passenger seat started screaming at her to go, 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 don't stop. And so she floorboarded it. And she said, as the thing went by, it was still looking in right at her. And she said she felt it trying to pull her soul out of her body. And then the lady who was driving, she said she glanced up in the rearview mirror, and it crossed the road behind them, as they went by. And I said, can you find the place? Could you show me this place? And they said, yes, they could. So that evening, when we got off, we didn't get off till 7 p.m., but it was summertime, and so it was still daylight till nearly 9 o'clock. So we took off down there, and she showed me. They stopped, and they showed me where this all happened, and I found, I could tell that something large had come up out of that creek bed right there, and did come up right up on the shoulder right there by the sign. And I asked them how high up the thing was, and how high its head was. And I had to, I ended up getting a stick or something like that and held up there. Normally in my personal vehicle, I keep keep something in there like a stick of bamboo or something like that, or a hoe handle or something, and a paper plate and some duct tape or electric tape or a staple gun, and I'll attach that to that stick or whatever, and I'll hold it up high, and I'll tell them to stop me when it's where the thing's head was, and that's why I sort of figure out how tall the things were. But anyway, they had it marked pretty good. Both of them did, and it was about 9 feet tall, and they described the legs of it and everything, and that it was. They said it looked just like a big, humongous dog that you stood it up, and they described the legs. They described it had very prominent canine teeth that they could clearly see. fangs, they called it. And, but they said that I've had some people telling me that, when they're describing the thing that they saw horns, but I think that may be when the thing's got his ears laid back.
Right.
And, they said that, the thing definitely had ears, but they said the ears were laid down sometimes the ears stood up. And, but they looked like deer ears, like a German Shepherd or a wolf or a Dogman pincher or something would have. And, but once they gave me such an excellent description, firsthand, very recent description. Oh, they wouldn't hang around there with me for very long. They left.
Yep.
So I went across the road, and I found the thing's tracks going up the side of the pretty high bank. There was a bank about 13, 14 feet tall. On the other side of the road, I found one track from, if I remember correctly, its left foot, and another track about 6 feet, a little bit over my head, about halfway up the bank, and then another track about a foot short of the top of the bank. That thing scaled that bank in one complete stride. When I say a stride, I mean this is when you take off with your right foot, and say a stride is when you take off with your right foot and your left foot hits the ground. Your right foot hits ground, your left foot hits ground, and when your right foot hits ground the next time, that's a stride. Did I say that right? Anyway, it's a stride is from the heel of the track from the right foot to the heel of the track, the next right foot track.
Okay.
That is a stride.
Now, that track that you saw, was it that was clear? Because a couple people asked questions, the Type 4, as we know, what we call Dogman. Is there any resemblance to, let's say, our track? Like the Sasquatch has a very more like
this
canine.
thing. That's why I say that's why I'm sure that this is a completely different creature.
Okay.
Totally unrelated to Bigfoot, because Bigfoot have plantigrade feet. In other words, every step they take, their heel hits the ground. When they're standing still, their heel is on the ground. This is when they're upright now, not when they're down quadrupedal, but when they're standing upright, their heel is on the ground just like us. Every step they take, their heel hits the ground just like us. These Dogman have digitigrade feet. In other words, they walk on the ball of their feet, the ball of their foot, and their toes. Their heel is actually like the hock on a dog or a horse. It never touches the ground. That's why people say that that people describe dog legs or Dogmen. They say that their leg it bends backwards.
Yep.
Well, it really doesn't. It's just that their heel is off the ground. They have a knee just like we do, but the knee is up higher next to their, right about even with their belly, But their hock, or what is on a human or a great ape or a Bigfoot, is their heel is up higher. It doesn't touch the ground. Unless, like, some dogs, when they bow up to take a poop, they'll rock back on their heel or their hock, when they're pooping. But I have one of my German Shepherds does that. The other two don't. But when they're walking, their heels don't touch the ground. Like I said, they have digitigrade feet. In their tracks, you see just the ball of the foot and the toes. Now, these toes did have claws. I mean, the tracks did show claw marks on them. So they do have canine type claws. Sometimes you'll see a toenail drag on a Bigfoot track if the ground is soft enough, but Bigfoot don't have claws like a dog. Don't have claws.
Right. Okay.
So
what about
now,
the third variety that you?
The third variety is something that I don't know. The jury's still out on what that is.
Okay.
You know, but it is related to a Bigfoot. It is a primate.
Okay.
Because it has plantar-grade feet. I think there is a chance that it could be some kind of genetic defect or genetic throwback. Because a fair amount of the what I call type 3 tracks, which they have where they have, you can see the heel mark. You know, they have plantar-grade feet, but a fair amount of the tracks only show 3 toes. And so even humans at times, there are humans that are born with some of their toes webbed together and even some of their fingers webbed together.
Right.
So if they walked like that, they would show a 3-toed track.
Yeah.
Or or only 4 toes. However they happen to be webbed together. But also I have seen their tracks that have claws, where there are definite claw marks at the end of the toes, and that's another one I can't figure. But I also do know this, that when those type 3s, but the type 3s also have some people call them baboon-looking heads, some people call them dog-looking heads.
Right.
But the heads are different than the type 4s, the canid types. I call the type 4 is what I call the canid type. But and it may be the source of the old Egyptian god Anubis and some of these other things, or maybe the loup-garous or the werewolves and stuff like that of infamy. But the type 3 is something different. It's not. I think it's probably close enough to a type 1 or type 2 that they could interbreed. And like I said, it may be some kind of physical defect. But again, I know this: they keep to themselves. They don't get along with the others, with the type 1s or type 2s. And the reports that I've heard from some reliable sources in different places around the country are that when these type 3s show up, the other Bigfoot leave. They let them have their territory.
Okay.
They don't. At least that's some of the reports that I've been told. That I've heard that several times in several parts of the country. I mean, places as diverse as Texas and Oklahoma, Iowa, North Carolina, and I think these type 3s of the 4 types, these type 3s are the most rare.
Okay.
I get less reports of those than any of the other 3.
Have you actually had an interaction or spotted one or
no? I have never seen one.
Okay.
And I've only ever myself seen the tracks 2 times. Once in Mississippi and once in Louisiana.
Wow.
Now, I've seen some really good photographs of them, but as far as putting my eyes on them, I've only ever seen them 2 times.
Okay.
The tracks. And another thing that I've heard, and I first heard this in Texas and didn't think much of it. Second time I heard it was in Oklahoma, and then I've heard it several times up in an area of Iowa, and I've heard it, and in fact, I've heard it in North Carolina, and my great grandmother had talked about sort of in a cryptic way, but that these things, these type 3s, that they really stick close together, and that if you find one, there's absolutely going to be more of them there. And there's an area that there's couple of different places I know where those are about all you're going to find in certain areas. But they don't live in amongst the other ones. You know, when these guys show up, the rest of them get out of there.
Okay.
And then they can be in fairly large groups. You know, like up in the 20 to 30 of them.
Wow.
But you know, I've investigated that. You know, that kind of reports 2 or 3 times. You know, where there were large groups of them.
Right. That's
but
interesting.
Again, though, I've never laid eyes on one.
Right.
Now, if you want to see what one looks like, though, do a search for the Beast of Seven Chutes.
Right.
It's Seven Chutes is a park up in Quebec, or Quebec, I think that's correctly pronouncing it, or Quebec, I'm not sure. Whatever. Anyway, and this guy got a good picture of one, and it is exactly what I've heard descriptions of, you know, going back into the 90s.
Right.
You look at it, and it does look much more baboon-faced.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've heard quite a few people just refer to them as the snouted ones.
Okay.
You know, which they've got like a baboon-type snout on them.
Right. Now, I love the way that, you know, 'cause it just made me remember, I think it was the first time you and I talked, when we were talking about 1 and 2, and you said, look at the picture of the Neanderthal,
right.
and take away the stick and that's what you've got. And
yeah, take away the stick and get rid of the vertical slit pupils.
Yep.
And put a little bit more human type nose on it. That is, you know, maybe more Aboriginal or you know, a little bit more African looking nose or Aboriginal looking nose, and then you've got a type 2. And you know, they're the type 3s, their body form is like a type 2.
Okay.
But they've got a different head. And like I said, it's pretty common when when I've heard type 3 reports that I classified as a type 3 that they would have 3-toed tracks.
Okay.
Now, you don't hear, there's very few people talk about this, but there have been a number of tracks found, supposedly. I've seen a couple of photographs of them, but I've never seen one myself. But out in the Pacific Northwest area, starting in Northern California, going all the way up into the western coast of Canada, that there is a sub-variety of type 1s that have a weirdly splayed toes, that their toes are spaced differently, or it's been so long since I've seen one of these photographs that I can't remember exactly what it was, but I've heard reports of that multiple times from people that have seen them out along in the Pacific Northwest, that they found these tracks that the toes were really odd. Now, I don't know if that could have been from some that had broken their toes at some point in their life and they just healed back crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But then there was and I can't remember the guy's name. There was a researcher I talked to, and he firmly believed that was a subset of the type 1s, or what I call the type 1s, or the petty type. And that their toes were made different, some because of the terrain or something like that, or because of them climbing trees more or something. I don't remember all the details of it, but that was an interesting little thing because there are people out there that say that there's a whole lot more than just 4 types.
Right. Yeah.
And I didn't include. I actually include in my list 5 types. Number 5 being the little people, and I've never seen anything that would fit the description of little people. But I know a few very reputable researchers that swear that they've had encounters with them.
Would that be
I'm not discounting.
Would that be classified as like elf kind of, or because I've done a couple of I had a couple of encounters sent to me with people talking about like a 5 to 4 foot sized Sasquatch looking creature. Would that be a little person, or would you consider that an adolescent or juvenile Squatch?
Well, it's hard to say. They found what it in Sumatra. They've pretty much proven the orang pendak.
Yeah.
They've actually found skeletal remains and such as that. I wonder if it could just be an orang pendak. But they seem to be, one thing about them is they seem to be, quite pugnacious. And it's pretty common to hear reports about them using vegetation, to camouflage themselves with, putting stuff on their heads and stuff like that. And that they supposedly are extremely strong for their size.
Okay.
And then there are people that tell you it doesn't take but a couple of them to drag a grown human off and eat him. They're supposed to be pretty bad predators, and that they are not beyond grabbing and eating a human, supposedly.
Wow.
But that's just some stuff I've heard. I don't know anything about it. In fact, that's just
right.
Campfire stories I've heard about them. And but like I said, I don't anything like that. I've just heard people talk about them. So don't throw any. So any people listening to this, don't throw rocks at me because I don't embrace them, and don't throw rocks at me because I sort of blow them off, or because of me repeating some things that I've heard from other folks.
Right.
So I don't know anything about them. I've never spent any time researching them. I just know a few reputable researchers that are pretty well known that strongly believe in them and that have actually had encounters with them.
Yeah. What was if you don't mind sharing, and if you can share, what would be your most, while out in the field, your most terrifying event that you've had?
One of the scariest things that ever happened to me was when I was a kid. My dad and I were fishing down on the Tennessee River in a backwater called in a big impoundment, or not really impoundment. We're on Pickwick Lake of the Tennessee River, up in an area that's called Bear Creek.
Okay.
And this is where Bear Creek empties into the Tennessee River. It's pretty wide there, and it was early. It was spring, fairly early spring, when the largemouth bass are spawning. And one of the places they like to spawn is along what we call red banks, and they're these high red clay chert banks that along the river, and the wave action sort of erodes them, and it washes this fine gravel down along the base of it, and the bass like to get in there and fan out beds, and they lay their eggs and stuff in there, and it's a terrifically good place to fish. And one of the best methods for that is you use a jig, a rig called a jig and pig, and you pick a color and everything to make it look like a crawdad or crawfish. And you cast in towards the shore, and you have to start cranking pretty quickly and working it, or it'll sink down and get hung up in the rocks, because those rocks are really irregular shaped and a lot of holes in them and stuff. So we were fishing along this red bank, and I it was sort of windy that morning, and so I was using I think I was using a 3/8 ounce jig with a pork rind, deal on the back of it, and I cast in. I didn't reel fast enough, and it got hung up. And so my dad starts. He turns the boat around. And he starts backing with the trolling motor. Starts backing the boat in towards the bank so I can get my lure unhung. So I'm up on the back of the boat, and I'm jiggling my line and everything, and trying to get the lure loose. And we're right up under this bank that's about 20 feet tall, and 15 to 20 feet tall. And I'm straight down underneath it, and I'm sitting there jerking my lure up. And about the time I get my lure loose, from right up straight above me, this damn booger lets out an ungodly scream. Screamed right down on us. And I mean, it's so loud. It literally would have almost blown your head off, your head. I mean, it actually shook both my dad and I to the core. I mean, it shakes your whole body. I mean, it's unbelievably loud. I mean, ear-splitting loud. The most ungodly loud scream. And as the first time I was ever screamed at that close range, and I literally lost everything. And I came flying. I was up on the rear casting deck. I came flying off the casting deck, running up towards the front of the boat. And my dad stomps on spins the trolling motor around and stomps down on the button, and turns it wide open. And trying to get us out of there. We're too close in to crank up the big motor. And we're trying to pull out, and the thing screams at us like one or two more times. I mean, unbelievably loud. And that absolutely terrified me. I mean, shook me to my core.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And it scared us so bad that when we came home, we fished for another hour probably after that. When we came home, my mom knew something had happened. She said we were both wild-eyed, It scared both of us so bad. But as far as being out on a research trip, I guess one of the scariest things that ever happened to us is we were down in East Texas in the Big Thicket area, and this area is totally ruined now for researching. They've come in and clear cut it all and pretty much ruined it as a research area because we ran our mouths about it too much, and too many people got to going down there, and there was too much very easily visible sign, and it became just about a circus back in the early 2000s. But anyway, we were down in this area of East Texas in the Big Thicket, and we'd heard a lot of sighting reports from this area. And so there was a group of and we'd taken a fairly large group in there. We were camping down there. I think there were 19 of us. And we had gone back into an area where there was lots and lots of sign. We'd scoped it out that day. I mean, the day before, or that day, and we went back into this area that night. And on the way in, we passed this is in a Texas state park, and or a recreation area. We passed a horse camp where, and around these horse camps seems to be a pretty good place often, and I don't know what the attraction is, but the boogers seem to hang around them. I don't know if there's extra good stuff for them to steal, or they got better dumpsters there or what, I don't know. But we just passed this horse camp, and we topped the hill, and as I came over the hill, right in my high beams, there was an absolutely enormous light, very, very light beige colored Bigfoot crossing the road. And this dude was like 11 and a half, 12 feet tall. It was freaking enormous. I've never seen another one that size before. Now, since then, and I have found several people down there that live in that area that they've known about this particular one for ages and knew how big it was. And so this has been corroborated by quite a few different people. And the size of this thing. But with it was a normal, another one that was normal sized. And these were the type 1 type. This was a type 1. And anyway, so we catch the thing in our spotlight in my high beams. Instantly, the guy that was in the front seat, passenger side, and the guy was on the passenger side in the right hand side of the back seat of my truck, where I was in a Ford F-250 crew cab. I was driving. They each had spotlights, and they went out the windows with the spotlights and started trying to light them up with spotlights. Well, the big one got across the road. He disappeared in the woods across the road. Well, I had a hand, just like a 6 D-cell mag light with a xenon bulb in it. I went out the window on the driver's side and was shining in the woods trying to see where that big one went. And in the meantime, the other 2 guys are hollering at me to the one that was side of the road, and they had him sort of pinned down with the spotlights, and he was behind a big bush. Well, I looked around, and about that time, it came running out from behind the bush, and it was going to try to run ahead of us and cross the road. Well, I floorboarded the truck and cut him off. And the guys were just about sunburning him with those spotlights. And he ran and he stopped and he started screaming at us again. And then he whirled and tried to run across again. Now, mind you, he couldn't go behind us because behind me were 2 other vehicles, 2 vans that were with us. And like I said, there was 19 people in this caravan. And so then they were all trying to get up there to see what was going on, because they were seeing the lights and everything and getting glimpses of it. And so this thing took off, like I said, for the second time and tried to run in front of us, and I cut him off and slammed on it ran back off the road. We slammed on the brakes. We were shining the spotlight on it. It screamed at us. It took off a third time, and we cut him off again. And then it took off a fourth time, and we cut him off, and it stopped, and it screamed at us 2 or 3 times, and it turned around and went running back through the woods away from the road, back to the right from the direction it had originally come, I assume. And so everybody was all excited about that. So we get down to the place where we decided we were going to do our calling thing. We got out, we did our normal thing. Everybody got their vehicles turned around, pointed in the safe way out of there. We got out. We tried to keep people as quiet as we could. And we had some people there with cameras and a person with at that time, it was about the best low-light video camera that you could get. It was one that Sony made. And now this is in the very early 2000s. And we kept as quiet as we could for about 20, 30 minutes. And then I made one call and got a lot of response. I mean, a lot of response from multiple directions. And it sort of calmed down a little bit. And I made one more call. And when I made the second call, the other ones, we got all these responses from different directions, and they just kept going. And we could tell they were working their way towards us. When I did the second call, they got homed in on where we were. And so they're coming into us. We had some very early thermal devices with us. And as they got close, myself and two other guys were concentrating on keeping track of where they were. At one point, we had 16 individual thermal targets coming in on us. 16 now. There were 19 of us. As they were getting closer, we saw a couple of those ones we thought were single targets start splitting. And we started being able to pick out, well, then, there's really two there. No, there's three. And we just kept turning around and around trying to keep count of how many they were, and they were coming closer. And as they got close, it was like they were doing so many calls back and forth amongst themselves, doing all these owl calls and crow calls and roosters, and some of them were braying like donkeys, and I mean, just the crazy crap that they were doing. And it was comical to me at first. And then I realized as they were getting closer and it was getting louder and louder, several of the people in the group were becoming disoriented from the unbelievably loud cacophony of noise. And they kept getting closer and closer, and we realized that we were surrounded on three sides of all these boogers, or Bigfoot, making unbelievable amounts of noise, but there was no noise whatsoever coming from one direction. But we were still picking up a lot of thermal signal out there, a lot of thermal traces, and so we knew. And this is pretty typical of how they'll make racket and do things to distract you, while some other ones are in stealth mode, sneaking up right up on you.
Right.
And so we were training the thermal on them, the ones coming up behind us, and it was almost like that they figured out that we had them figured out, and it pissed them off. Because all of a sudden, all this racket that they were noise, all these vocals that they were doing, went from being this hilarious collection of just all kind of different noises to, it was like somebody flipped a switch. It, in a split second instant, changed from being funny to some of us, or just really entertaining, really interesting, just really amazing,
right,
to all of a sudden being dead damn serious threatening.
Yeah.
I mean, very serious threatening. And we realized they weren't charging us full blown, but they were coming right in on us. And one side of this area where we were parked had a thick belt of privet hedge around it. And all of a sudden, they started coming through that privet hedge right out into the parking area where we were. We started trying to get people in the vehicles to get the hell out of there. They didn't want to go. The boogers were going crazy. All of a sudden, we realized that there were 24 at least, or more of them, right there on top of us. And they were just coming. They were just coming out right out of the bushes. And then they started coming out around, a part of more of the perimeter of the parking area. And there was, all of a sudden I looked around, and coming out through those hedges was that damn big-ass alpha male that just towered above all the rest of them. The big beige-colored one. And we were shoving, at this point, we were physically grabbing people and shoving them into vehicles. And we got the first van loaded up, the rear one loaded up, and slammed the doors on it. And there were two or three that were just right there, almost within touching distance of these things. And oh, this is so wonderful. Oh, this is, they were wanting to hug them and kiss them and all this kind of crap. And these things were screaming and baring their teeth and all this. And this was going downhill quick. We nearly broke a person's leg, shoved them into the van, and actually slammed the van door on there, one of the back doors of the van on their leg. And I thought I'd broken somebody's leg. Anyway, when we finally got everybody into the vans, we start running. Myself and the last guy that was out there, we're running to my truck, and that big Alpha stepped at the other guy and sort of whiffed him along the back of his head and maybe across the shoulder blade or something. But I thought he had hit him. And the way he swung, if he had hit him, it'd have nearly taken his head off. I think all he was doing was just trying to scare him.
Right.
But he felt the wind whiff by his back of his head and his neck and everything. And he did a full-on dive into the truck, into the passenger side front seat of the truck. And in fact, he nearly landed all the way over on the driver's side of the truck. And I piled in, and the truck was already running, thank God. And I think it was running. I don't even really remember starting. I just remember jumping in it, yanking it in gear, and floorboarding it. And I think that's when the door shut on the passenger side front, and we went tearing out of there. And they were at this time, they were all out there, and they were screaming at us and all this mess. And we went to a place. We went to a place 2 or 3 miles away and stopped. And we first got out just checking to see if everybody's okay. If we had everybody, making double dog sure we had everybody, that we hadn't left somebody behind. That's my biggest fear, taking people out, is fear of somebody being left out. Well, everybody was accounted for. Everybody was okay. The person that we'd slammed the van door on, they weren't pissed off. They were laughing about it. And so we started, what'd you get on camera? Everybody's camera batteries were screwed. We got on that fancy Sony, which we made sure that everything was fully charged. Fresh batteries and everything were in everything that wasn't rechargeable. We had a bunch of the vocals that survived on that fancy Sony video camera, but there was no video at all that was visible, that you could tell what it was. Nobody else had gotten any. Nobody got any pictures. There was only one other recorder that had gotten a little bit of the vocals. Out of 19 people, and probably 8 to 10 of them had some type of device on them, recording, that was capable of either taking pictures or video or audio or whatever. All we got was a little bit of audio, and they had died. Everything had just died, and I had a camera then. It was back when Toshiba was making digital cameras, and at that time it was a hot rod camera. That thing, and I had just put brand spanking new batteries in it, and that thing was dead as a fritter. I mean, it was totally dead. And I had given it to somebody else to use, and somebody that knew what they were doing, and it had just died. I was so disappointed. But that right there was probably, we've had some really hairy stuff. That's the one that has scared me the most and has changed the way that we did things, because we came very, very, very close to getting somebody killed.
Yeah, that is terrifying. I mean, just the way I'm mapping it out in my head as you were talking about it, and to have them 3 sides verbal, and thinking, okay, I got a way out of here, but then thermal, oh God, there's, I mean, it's...
Yeah, they were, yeah. And I really don't know how many were there. We have talked amongst ourselves about this, the ones about the serious researchers that were in the group. There were, let me think, if I go back, let me see, 4, 5, there were about 6 or 7 of us in the group that were serious researchers, and the rest were people that acquaintances that we'd gotten to know over social media that we had invited along, that, you know, if they wanted to come with us, that they could. And so the serious researchers group, we have discussed this thing over and over and over and over again over the years, and we all agree that the good Lord took care of us. I mean, that it is an absolute wonder we didn't lose somebody, and somebody didn't get hurt or killed. But that's the one that I've lost the most sleep over, and thought about the most over the years. You know, that what we could have done different, or I'm just wondering what it would have been like if it had only been like 3 or 4 of us out there, and, you know, and we were serious researchers.
Right.
If we'd have made it out of there alive. Because I've been in myself and a guy named Michael Stuckey, who's a good researcher, and I think he lives in Tennessee now. But Michael and I, the two of us, used to go out quite a bit. And we were down in a place in a conservation area along the Tennessee-Tombigbee Waterway down in Mississippi one time, and we got into a deal where, a very similar deal, where there was we'd made a call, and up a creek bottom, we got this unbelievable vocalization started up, and they started in on us, coming towards us, and Mike had a bionic ear going, and he had it up and pointed. We were in my truck, and we'd been out on the road, and we decided, no, we got in the truck, we figured we get ready to go. So we were in the truck with the windows down and ready to roll, but we had our recorders and everything going, and he was recording all this, and they were coming in on us, and he heard something through the bionic ear. It sounded like crashing through the brush coming towards us, and poor old Mike was about to have a fit, and all of a sudden it burst out of the brush. I mean, I could hear something coming because it was on my side of the truck. Mike had the bionic ear antenna in his hand up, you know, pointed out the passenger side front seat, you know, the passenger side window of the front seat, pointed back over the truck, you know, back to the left. But all the racket and the boogers were coming from my side, and I could hear something coming. But to Mike with the bionic ear, it sounded like, you know, somebody was crashing. They were crashing through the brush right on top of. Well, what came out was a damn armadillo, and that armadillo had the afterburners on. The boogers were scaring him. He wanted out of there, and I mean, he came flying out. He ran under our truck, under the driver's side, and out from under. But it wasn't just a few seconds later, and here came the boogers.
Wow.
And they were quite pissed off at us, and so we didn't hang around. They started. I heard some stuff flying through the air, you know, throwing rocks or sticks or whatever. I didn't actually see any of them, but I didn't want to get hit. And, at that time, I wasn't 100% sure, like I am now, that they don't. You know, I think if a person gets hit by something thrown by a Bigfoot, it's accidental. That they throw stuff close to you, but not to hit you.
Yeah, almost like kind of like a warning.
Yeah, I've seen 2 people get hit, but it was by ricochets.
Okay.
And when the person got hit, the throwing stopped after that. We had one of my research buddy got got hit in the shin by a ricocheted rock about the size of a softball that was thrown at us up in a canyon in New Mexico, and they were bombarding all around us from two different directions, and this rock came from behind us and over us and hit a boulder out in front of us and bounced back and hit my buddy in the shin, and he hollered and everything, and I mean, instantaneously all the bombardment stopped, and then we were down at a place in a campground in Alabama, and we were getting pelted by rocks from several different directions, and one of them hit the roof of a shelter. We were under a pavilion in this park that was back off in the woods, and the rock came in and hit a tree, bounced off the roof of the pavilion, and hit one of the ladies in the group. Oh. And she made a ow or something like that. Right. And I mean the bombardment stopped instantly.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Really quick, we're coming up on about 2.5 hours. I don't have much recording time left. I've got a couple of interesting things that I've been writing down. I'm going to save for a next, maybe another conversation. Mm-hmm. I'll give you a little hint on one, is what you were just talking about with the incident with the vans and the multi-people. One of the things that I'd like to talk about next time we get together is the fact that cameras, batteries, and things don't seem to stay charged or work.
Right.
So I think that'll be, hopefully we can get some time together again, and if you're willing to come back, that'd be great.
Oh yeah,
but,
absolutely.
Like I said, we're almost on time, and I don't want to run out of time, so we don't say goodbye. But please don't hang up when we end the interview. But is there anything that you'd like to say to everybody before we end the interview?
Yeah, I'd like to make a shout out to a friend of mine that we had an expedition back in October. 5 or 6 of us went down to an area in Oklahoma that we've been wanting to research, and had some excellent results. And got to spend time one of the few times that I've parked my booger mobile and spent the whole time riding with somebody else, and that was with my buddy Wade Parker, and we had a great time. We got into the boogers big time down there in one area, and we explored some new territory. We also did something that you've heard of, the infamous Brown Springs down there.
Yep.
We spent a whole night down there at afternoon and well into the night in the Brown Springs area, and we didn't just stay right there at the springs. We hit areas up and down the Red River Valley there. From the when I say up and down, we didn't go all that far, but we spread out. We covered an area up and down the river, probably 4 or 5 miles, and amazingly, we didn't find a thing there in that area. And I think those boogers been messed with too much. And but Wade it was really fun getting to being in that small group like that. That's the first time we've spent that much time with that small of a group out in a while, and we had great results, and it was really fun getting to be in the field with Wade. In fact, he's got one of the best research vehicles I've ever been in, and it was he's got a Hummer, and an H3 Hummer, and I mean it's ready. He did it right, and I thought though we were going to get some windows busted out of it. We got into one place, and there were throwing everything from a softball to basketball-sized rocks in our direction. And had one, as we were making our exit out of that place, we had one sail, probably cantaloupe-sized sail right over the top of the roof of the car. I heard it coming and heard it leaving. It was clipping limbs as it went.
Wow.
And it hit a tree trunk about 10 foot beyond me, and ricocheted off. I was afraid it was going to hit his car, but it didn't. But we had a good time. But anyway, I'm hoping to get on future shows to be able to talk about some things that I haven't really shared much before. A lot of stuff that we talked about tonight are things that, if you've listened to me very much, you've heard all this stuff.
Yeah,
most of it before.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I'm always open. I love talking to you. I mean, even when we don't record and we just had these conversations just recently, you're a very interesting guy. I like talking to you a lot. And, maybe next time when we get together, we can talk about some things that you haven't shared. What I just discussed. And then I just came up with an idea is how to set up a boogermobile.
Yeah. Well, I'm telling you what, I had some ideas, and Wade took those ideas and built on them tremendously, and man, that thing is something else. It's awesome. And it was really a great trip. But another thing I'd like to do is, if we can get together, you get together some questions and stuff that, from listeners or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'd be glad to, answer questions. And
absolutely.
And
what I'll do is I'll make a community post tonight. I'll think of, I'll word it really good, and then I'll put it up in the community post, and then subscribers can ask the questions. I'll jot them all down or print it out, and then we can go from there. Yeah. And, I'll tell you up front that I'm not scared to say I don't know. Right. And if I don't know, I'll tell you I don't know, and I'll tell you if it's pure speculation, what some things are, but a lot of things, people have asked me things in the past that I've been able to, they've been told one thing, and I was able to, work through it, and we were able to figure out what was really going on. Right. And that's an honest. Right there is honesty. You've been doing this for a very long time, and a lot of people would consider you an expert, and for you to say. I don't know that's very humbling, and that just shows what kind of researcher you are is that. Well, so. Another thing is I've said, anybody that's listened to me very much has heard me say that if you're not able to change your mind about something, to relook at the data and admit when you're wrong, or realize when you have misread something, then you're not much of a researcher. I've had to change my ideas and theories on a number of things several times. Right. So we're learning all the time. If you're not learning all the time, I mean, none of this stuff is set in stone. Yeah. There's not a Sasquatch 401, or graduate level, Sasquatch research manual or something. Right. All of us that are any good are constantly learning. Yeah. And there are people out there that do absolutely astoundingly good research and work, and are coming up with terrific things that the public never hears about. And
more than me about certain aspects of Bigfoot, and I feel honored when I get to spend time with them.
Yeah.
But I guess I just got a big mouth and I could talk about it.
Well, I mean, everybody likes listening to you, so I mean, it's and it's like you said, you like to, you feel honored spending time with certain people. It's an honor when I get to speak to you, so I really appreciate you taking time out to talk to me. So it means a lot. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the opportunity and that's one thing I'm about now. I like to teach people. I've done that most of my career, teaching people about different things.
Right.
All righty.
All right. Well, I appreciate it, and I look forward to having you come on again. Why don't you say goodbye to everybody, and we'll move on.
All righty. Well, thank you I appreciate the opportunity very, very much.
Thank you, Mr. Baker.
Alrighty, folks, I hope you enjoyed this second half as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is your support, after all, that helps the channel to continue to grow and go, and honestly what gives people a place to share their experiences, ideas, and theories, judgment and ridicule free, just simply treated with the respect that we all deserve. Thank you. Everyone stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real, they are out there, and they are dangerous. Share this information with the people you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for answers, and God bless.